away from the American people. It's to find an extra dollar for this tax policy under Donald Trump that my constituents started calling back in 2017 the Trump tax scam. Wow. Right? Well, why are you calling it that? And they said, well, everyone promised me, I'm making less than the median income, making less than $80,000, which is a lot of money in New Mexico. Across America, median income there is a little lower. I was told that we were going to get the brunt of this tax cut, recognizing that we're hardworking and how hard it is to make ends meet. But that's not what happened. Most of this went to families and folks making over $2.8 million. I don't have anything against those families. I wish them well. I want them to make more, $10 million next year. But they don't need a tax cut. That should be going to those hardworking families that were told that they were being prioritized, but they're the ones that told me anyway, that this was a Trump tax scam. That's the secret. That's where all this money's going. So, Senator Booker, whether I'm in a grocery store and I'm chatting with constituents, and we're out there looking at egg prices or whatever it may be, they're concerned about what's going on here, and all they're asking for me to share with my colleagues here is just tell them to tell us the truth.
Yes.
If they're going to vote to take these programs away, they have the votes by Republican colleagues. Just be honest. Treat my constituents with the respect and dignity so that they can plan. So that a single mom that has a child whose Medicaid may get ripped away, but that child has cancer, how are they going to plan for care in 6 months? So that farmer who started planting seeds recently but was planning over a year on what to do so they could find another customer so that they're not going to lose that farm as well. Now, before I ask you this question, sir, I want to end with this. Senator Booker, you often share a story of Abraham Lincoln's inaugural address, his second, and the man whose reviewed mattered most to the 16th President of the United States.
One of my favorite stories.
When asked his opinion of Lincoln's performance, former slave and abolitionist Frederick Douglass replied, "It was a sacred effort." Let me be the first to say this is a sacred effort, Senator Booker, and I'm proud to stand alongside you. So, Senator Booker, the question that my constituents and I have for you is, can the farmers and ranchers of America afford to pay for another Trump tax scam with all this nonsense that's going on? I mean, it's a question I get when I'm at church. I say not during church, but after church is okay.
Yeah.
Or at the grocery store. But when I'm visiting with folks back home, this is what they're asking me.
And thank you for the question. You said it, the same words that literally, I didn't write these words, my staff wrote this little paragraph here. Trump is pulling the rug from out from under producers that need stability and reliable markets. Because you and I sit, right by each other in the Ag Committee, and we see this connection that you so beautifully say, this idea that we are separate from each other, the invisible lines that divide us in this country are bunk compared to the strong ties that bind us. That farmer producer in a rural neighborhood is deeply connected to the person in my community. And I live in an inner city, Newark, New Jersey. There is a powerful spiritual connection. And you talk to that farmer, and they've got pride that they're feeding America. And they have pride in the ground. You described it so beautifully. They have pride in their soil. They want to be stewards of the land, and they want to create a vibrant American food system. And they rely on people that empower them in that process and don't pull the rug out from under them, drag back contracts, cut programming, especially not those programs that help them get fresh fruits and vegetables, healthy foods to food banks. You talk to the food banks, they'll attest that families, how grateful they are for that fresh fruits and vegetables. You said it right. Parents want the best quality food for their kids. But this food system is killing them. And when I heard the new Secretary of HH&S talk about, hey, we need to get greater access to fresh, healthy foods. Food is medicine. Things I've been saying for years. And what do they do when they get in there? They cut the very programs that help our farmers and get fresh fruits and vegetables to kids to deal with chronic disease. How could you say out of one side of your mouth, Trump, oh, I'm going to let the Maha people go their way, and then the first thing you do is cut the programs that help kids get healthy, nutritious foods? It makes no sense. It makes no economic sense. It hurts our farmers. It hurts our farm workers. It hurts our end users. It's not fair, and I appreciate your question, sir. Thank you.
Would the senator from New Jersey yield for a question?
Let me think about this for a second.
You take your time thinking about it, sir.
I want to thank Senator Whitehouse. He's been a colleague and a friend for a long time, and he stands right there at that desk for very long speeches. I think I'm trying to go a long time. You go a consistency of times, and you've talked about the climate crisis, you've talked about the Supreme Court scams. You've not only educated members in this body on these issues, you've educated America. You are a YouTube star now, and I learn from you every time I hear you speak. So I'm a little worried right now, but I'm going to step out on faith and yield for a question while retaining the floor.
So, first question. It's been 17 hours. How you doing?
I shall not complain. I shall not complain, but thank you for checking in on me, my friend.
Yeah, well, thank you for what you're doing. Second question, if you would yield for a second
Yes,
question without yielding the floor.
I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
One of the ways in which I try to discuss what's going on in this country when people are horrified, anxious, astonished, whatever, is to describe it as the rule of the looters and the polluters. The looters are the creepy billionaires coming to government, trying to figure out how to get even more for themselves. It used to be that people thought that there was a thing too rich to steal. That doesn't seem to be a thing for these creepy billionaires. They're more than happy to wreck Social Security so that they can send in their tech bros and their private equity folks to put right what they have broken. And the looting goes on across the entire face of government, scarred and disfigured by Musk and his little Musk rats, I like to call them. And then, of course, you've got the polluters who are doing a similar thing, which is to steal from the public, only instead of stealing through government, they're stealing by dumping their pollution into our common air, into our common climate future, into our waters, into our lands, and defending through political influence and clout and power and dark money in this building.
I like it. It's funny as hell.
Their privilege to pollute for free. And the end point of both of those...
That guy in the background right there? It's like, listen, they told you, you got to get out of the shot because we got to make it look like there's nobody in the fucking place. So, listen, I need you to move
side of that, the
out of the way.
who are
So when
behind
they're
the
shooting him, it looks like the
scheme
place
or
is
out
empty,
to
all right? So
wreck
I'm
the
going to
American
move,
government
and
so
then
they
you got to
can
move, all
regulate
right?
their conduct or make them
He's
behave
like,
like
well, I don't really
honest
know.
bankers
Yeah,
and
but they're
investors
gonna
or
move anyway,
insurers
so
or
it's gonna
whatever.
look like it's empty.
React for a moment, if you would, to that framing
Right, what do you think that conversation was?
our
Everybody
beautiful
got up and
country
ran away.
now being subject to the really malevolent whims of the big looters and the big polluters.
Well, first of all, I will say to you that I meet wealthy people like a group called the Patriotic Millionaires who advocate for progressive tax policy and are the first to say and speak out against this tax scam. I don't, again, it's to me, what does patriotism mean to you? Patriotism, by definition, means love of country. If you don't love your fellow countrymen and women, how do you love your country? And so, what would you do? I actually know what you would do. I don't even have to answer this question. If somehow you came into $1 billion or more dollars, you would not be asking for more. You would literally say, wait a minute, Republican Congress, wait a minute, Donald Trump, what you're trying to do is take away health care from expectant mothers, from disabled children, from seniors, in order to give me more tax credit, I would think that the patriotic thing to do, that the thing in love, you would say, Donald Trump, go screw yourself.
If the senator would yield for another question while retaining the floor.
I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
I would add to your comment and request your response to the observation that not only is this an appalling manifestation of greed by people who already have more money than they're able to spend in their entire lifetimes, but the manner in which they are accomplishing their purpose is pretty loathsome in and of itself. Because the manner in which they are accomplishing their selfish purposes is to corrupt and degrade this great American democracy that we are all here to defend.
Yes.
And they do it by taking their billions and running it through phony front groups, so it pops up as dark money in elections. And of course, the beneficiary of the dark money, the candidate, figures out exactly who's behind the big dark money contribution that ends up in the super PAC that is supporting them. And of course, the big donor knows that they gave the money. So the deal between the creepy billionaire and the in hoc to them political candidate is made. But because it's dark money, because it's secret, because it goes through front groups and into the super PAC and ultimately into the campaign, courts don't know, public doesn't know, voters don't know, everybody else is left out of the joke.
Yes.
And so, bad enough that they're here arguing for excess benefits for themselves compared to regular Americans. Worse, they're using dark money corruption to get there. So how is that patriotic?
I want to answer this question so badly, but the crazy thing is the person best to answer this question is the person who asked it. You've sat here and given this detailed analysis to show how this group of very wealthy billionaires in this country are so perverting our system by creating these front groups that then interfere in our democracy in the most disgusting of ways. Even if you are like me and you that can't stand the decision of Citizens United.
How you doing?
Even
We're
in
just
Citizens
trying to
United, the majority
Today, I
of
feel
opinion
like
said
it's a spreading
really
of,
rejected that we should do the Disclose Act, which we
Just-
have tried to bring to this floor and
world.
get passed. It says no more dark money.
is what it is. Like,
How do we have a political system that is so corrupted by billionaires
for 17
who
hours.
so with all of their money drown out the voices
If you know how
and politics
it's
of other
set.
Americans. Great example of that is they're getting so reckless that many billionaires aren't even hiding it anymore.
Good to see you again,
i.e.
long time no
Elon
see.
Musk. He's like saying, hey, I'm going to roll up into a Supreme Court case up in one of our best Great Lakes states, and I'm just going to dump $100 million there and then give away, as if to insult our democracy, $1 million checks as part of my effort to influence an election with my overwhelming flood the zone amount of billions of dollars. And by the way, hey, it's a pretty good investment, right? I'm Donald Trump's biggest campaign contributor, and as soon as he gets elected, a lot of my stock goes up, although Tesla stock isn't doing so great right now. The reality is,
And I own Tesla stock.
we live in a country right
because
now
I believe in the concept
that we're
of
giving
compound.
more and
Like,
more ability for billionaires to use their wealth to rig the system and then get more wealth as a result of that. It is so corrupt and so corrupting to this. We have been talking about this, as you said, for 18 hours now. This
18, I'll update the
big,
thing.
unchecked corporate contributions, billionaire dollars, dark money in front organizations that nobody in the Senate has outlined better
I'm
than
interested
you
to know whether or
is
not
corrupting our Constitution and even the bad case Citizens United.
Senator Booker
Even
would
they
not
said this
say
shouldn't
for
happen.
it.
You all should write laws in this
Catch
place
the
that force people to disclose where that money's
If he's
coming from.
planning on
But how many years has it been
holding
since
the
Citizens
floor,
United?
too.
Many. And how many times have we
Brings it
failed?
up.
15? Guys, I don't know, and I'm so grateful for this man, because all my colleagues who are assembled here know. Doggedly and determinedly, you have stood right there with charts and graphs. You've outlined it ad nauseum. They've attacked you. because your truth is so threatening to them that more people will know about how big money is corrupting democracy. And so how many assaults are we going to have to watch in 71 days when we now have a president that can create a meme coin? Isn't there something here, my great constitutional scholar, a big word called emoluments? This president has basically created a meme coin where we now know, hard to trace this, that millions of dollars have been put into his pocket. I have my team reading about it right now.
There's
Foreign countries,
14.5 thousand watching.
Russian oligarchs,
And
incredible Arab wealth.
17
You want to
million
pay off the
people
Donald
watching
Trump?
to us.
You know, because his government is being run like this. It's not JFK. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. You've seen how he's behaved. It's ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for Donald Trump. That's how he does business. How do we know that? Look at the evidence of the last 71 days. If you are a law firm that comes to him and offers him $40 million of pro bono work, God, how many people I love in Newark had that kind of legal representation, pro bono. He is beating you up, threatening to ruin your business until you come to him and tell him what you're going to do for him. We're seeing it. You want a merger? You want a merger? What do? Give $1 million to his inaugural committee, and then find ways to get money to him through his meme coin, kowtow to him in any way possible. Senator Whitehouse, nobody has outlined this more than I have. Nobody, more than you have, excuse me. And I encourage people, I feel like now I'm advertising everywhere, social media. Go to his YouTube. I call him a YouTube star. I'm not joking. You have on YouTube, I know, just great details and outline about
This is
how
why
the
I'm here.
corruption of
Everybody,
money
like, go to
in
YouTube
politics
and
is
stuff.
getting
Get
worse
involved,
and
you
worse
know?
and worse in this era of billionaires like Elon Musk who have no shame anymore. And I'm going to say it on the Senate
All
floor.
right, that's the only one.
There are so many reports and stories of him threatening elected leaders, threatening to put $100 million in a primary challenge if they don't kowtow to what the great leader is telling them to do. This is, you use the word all the time, and I'm going to say it over and over. This is corrupting to our democracy and amounts to another assault on our Constitution. How much will we take, America, until we say enough, until we say no more, until we say pass the Disclose Act? Bring back the dark money, put light on it, shine the light of truth on this web of dark money lies. How long will we endure this? I hope that you and I are in the Senate when you no longer have to give that speech, because we took action on the Senate floor to end this nightmare of billionaires trying to outsize influence in our democracy.
Will the senator yield for a question?
Not immediately. I just want to say to Patty Murray, thank you. You were a co-conspirator in my life of trying to cause good trouble. You are one of the most powerful people in the United States Senate, yet you have never lost your compassion and your care for people. You're like somebody else I talked about in the Senate, two of my favorite people who lives this ideal that I may be a United States Senator, I may be head of appropriations, I may be President pro tem of the Senate, but I will never lose my connection to the people I represent and to the convictions that brought me to this place. You are such an honorable soul, you're such a great American, and you've been such a dear friend to me, this Congress. I savor the times where you let me come to you're a lot more seniority than me. You've got a great hideaway with a view. One day maybe. But I just want to say thank you, Patty Murray, for being so kind to me. And you're showing up right now gives me a lot of strength, puts more fuel in my tank. And so now I feel all this power. Now you outrank me in every imaginable way here, and you're the head of our Democrat appropriations, so I'm obligated by the state of New Jersey to be very obsequious to you. I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Well, I thank the senator from New Jersey. Thank you for your kind words. And I would just say the country is so grateful for what you are doing right now, because so many people are so frightened, worried, scared, and angry about what is happening to the basic values of this country that so many people have just thought would be there, that their kids would be able to go to school and get an education and not have to worry that the Department of Education was going to be gone and there wasn't a watchdog anymore or somebody to help them, or that the research at NIH was going to be dismantled. Perhaps they had a family member who was in the middle of some kind of scientific experiment that is now being dismantled. What happens to their hope? I hear from people on so many topics, seniors, who are waiting on hold for hours and then getting hung up on because there's nobody to answer the phone anymore. These are basic values that we have as a country, that we care for other human beings, and we're there as a country for them. And you are showing that fight today and inspiring so many people, and I will ask you a question in a minute, but I want to personally thank you for what you are doing today. It is so important. You are the voice of so many people today, and I so appreciate it. Now, I want to change the dynamic a little bit. I wanted to come today. You have talked about the impact in so many areas in our country, but I wanted to come and ask you about something really personal to me, and that is the impact on our veterans today. The senator may not know this, but when I came to the Senate many years ago, I asked to be on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I was the first woman ever to ask to be on the Veterans Committee. And the reason for me was very personal. As you may know, my dad was a World War II veteran, and my family relied on his VA care when he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. But I also, when I was in college during the Vietnam War, many of my friends and colleagues were on the streets demonstrating, and my heart was out to them, but I was thinking about those men and women my age who were going over to Vietnam and coming back and injured in many different ways. So I actually did my college internship. I asked to be at the Seattle VA. And I went to the Seattle VA during the Vietnam War and served on what was the psychiatric ward at the time. And I sat and worked with young men and women who were my age, in college age, who'd been sent there and came back with severe mental health impacts. Now today we call that PTSD, but at the time we didn't know it. And I was looking at these men and women who volunteered to go over, or sometimes their number came up at the time, and came home and were going to be impacted the rest of their lives. And I learned firsthand what it means when somebody says, I will go for my country to fight for all of you, so that you have that America that you've been talking about here for you when you get home. And our promise to each and every one of them was, if you serve your country in the military, we will take care of you when you get home. That is a promise I hold near and dear to my heart, which is why I asked to be on the Veterans Committee when I first came here, first woman ever. And I will tell you, I've seen the impact time and time again. I go home and I hold town halls when I was newly here, and there'd be a lot of veterans who'd come and talk to me and tell me what's going on, what needed to be fixed. But always at that time, I will share with my colleagues, women never said anything. There were a few always in the back of the room, and it wasn't until the regular meeting was over and they'd come up quietly to me and say, I need to tell you what's happening to women veterans. I need to share with you sexual assault. I need to share with you that there's not the facilities. I go to the VA, and it's a men's only kind of place. There's no OBGYNs. There's nobody to do mammographies. And I often don't feel comfortable sitting in that waiting room with a whole lot of people after I have had the experiences that I've had, and there's no place for women to go. So we've worked really hard to make sure the VA works for women. We've worked really hard to make sure the VA addresses the issues of today. The PACT Act that we worked so hard to make sure that men and women who were victims of a toxic exposure overseas got the services they need. I could speak for 2 hours here about all the things we've done. But then I see what this administration is doing to those men and women who we asked as a country to serve overseas or to here at home, in service of all of us and the promises we've made them. And I think, what are they doing? They're undermining the very value that all of us have given to Americans who serve above and beyond. So when I hear of 2,000 layoffs a few weeks ago, I go, wow, where's that coming from? Well, I know because I'm getting the phone calls, like I'm sure you are, from a VA researcher who has been taken off the job, fired, unexplained, told he wasn't doing a good enough job somehow, doing research on basic things like prosthetics, or doing basic research on PTSD, or doing basic research on the kinds of things that our men and women who serve overseas are subjected to and need to come home and have the specialized service and resources that they need. Or I hear from veterans who can't get the services that they've been asked for. So now when we are hearing this administration is about to cut 80,000, you didn't hear me wrong, 80,000 more people from the VA, a vast majority of themselves are veterans. I wanted to ask the senator, how does that hit you? How do you feel about that?
I'm so grateful you brought this up. And especially all the work we had to do when I got elected 12,
You
13
get to hang
years
out.
ago.
You've hung out with him. man.
One of the earliest things I did is meet with women veterans in my state and heard these awful stories about how long it took to get gynecological care. The waits that they had to do, the indignities they had to endure, and I'm glad we've made so many strides, in part thanks to your leadership in New Jersey, with special dedicated facilities to our women veterans, with shortening those wait times, with prioritizing them. But you're now right. Their proposal is to cut 83,000 positions from the VA. And you know this, you said it, this just years ago, this governing body passed the PACT Act with overwhelming bipartisan support. It was signed by President Biden in August of 2022, the largest health care and benefit expansion in VA history. You were one of the leaders, increasing disability compensation and extending eligibility for VA care. To meet this increased demand, the VA added 61,000 employees in 2023. These new hires included claim processors, physicians, nursing staffs, medical support assistants, food service workers, and housekeeping staff. And now the progress this body made is in jeopardy by this president. We added 61,000 just to keep up with the demands and the needs, and now he's cutting 83,000. This is an article, if you don't want me to yield. DAV urges Veteran Affairs to be more transparent about vet care amid layoffs and budget cuts. Veteran Affairs Secretary Doug Collins says veterans' care won't be impacted. We saw the largest expansion of VA healthcare benefits in a generation under the PACT Act. Collins attended DAV's recent midwinter conference where he came from behind the podium, walked into the audience, and told attendees that vet care and benefits would not be impacted by the Trump administration. In recent appearances on CBS Eye on Veterans podcast, DAV Communications Chief and Air Force veteran Dan Clare said the VA has not demonstrated how it's going to keep its promise. They have not demonstrated it. DAV also does not have a lot of information about what's planned, he said. Can you imagine that? Leaving all these veterans with insecurity and uncertainty. Now we're hearing about the 83,000 people losing their jobs. 20,000 or so folks might be veterans themselves. We're concerned about how we're going to be able to cut that many people and maintain care and benefits. The VA hired thousands of staffers since 2022 in response to the PACT Act, which brought 800,000 new enrollees into its systems. Collins has said cutting the VA workforce by 83,000 would bring it back down to its 2019 level before we did all those expansions to help women's vets. Clare said he has not heard about specific performance problems with those who've been laid off. Well, you haven't heard about it. Veterans' needs have not changed, and they remain great. The people who are sick from the burn pits didn't necessarily get better overnight, and some of these folks are going to have a long road to hoe when it comes to their health. DAV is getting calls frequently from veterans who are scared, angry, and don't understand what's going on and how it's going to affect them. Clare was one of the first whistleblowers on burn pits in Iraq, which eventually inspired the fight to pass the PACT Act to help veterans who became sick or even died from their toxic exposures. When we started talking about dioxin, when Vietnam veterans heard that, they immediately thought of Agent Orange. And that's probably what this is, our generation's Agent Orange. There's a lot of decisions being made behind closed doors, he continued. We want to know what the plan is. We want to know what the plan is. We're not against efficiency of government. We're not against even removing VA employees who may not be fit performers. A veteran has a unique understanding of another veteran's needs, Claire continued. When you lose those folks out of the VA, the veterans, you lose an institutional capacity to understand veterans. It is also unclear how these cuts will impact VA research, which Claire also stressed has helped veterans deal with complex issues that are service-connected, such as traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress. In addition to being concerned about how recent budget cuts and staff reductions will impact veterans care and caregivers, Claire said DAV is also concerned about the impact on veteran-owned small businesses. DAV is asking veteran business owners whose contracts have been recently canceled or who have been fired from their VA jobs to reach out here. DAV is actively keeping a list of veterans negatively affected by the Trump administration's cuts and plans on fighting for them in the weeks and months to come. And those lists that they're keeping are getting longer and longer and longer of people affected by this. So to answer your question, it's absurd, it is offensive, it's ready, fire, aim. Tens of thousands of veterans laid off, veterans who do business and work in contracts ended. Why is this another group that the President of the United States is scaring? Frightened veterans, angry veterans. I'm hearing from them in my state. You know you're hearing them from yours. What's the plan? What's the plan? What's the plan? They have no answer for us. All they're doing is cutting Social Security staff, undermining the delivery of those services, the cutting the VA services. And why, by the way? Is it creating efficiency or effectiveness? No. Is it to create savings? Because we got to create savings to give more of those tax cuts to billionaires like Elon Musk. It is not fair. It is not right. When we send people off into the most dangerous environments on the planet Earth and ask them to put their lives on the lines for us, the least we can do as a nation is not penny pinch on their backs of the service that they deserve.
For one additional
I
question.
yield for a question while retaining the floor.
The senator's right. And so many veterans are afraid right now. And I had a veteran tell me that he was one of those people that got the letter, you haven't performed well. He worked for the National Park Service, actually. And he said, I've been saving lives. I've been cleaning trails. I've been making sure that the national parks are safe for all of you. And then he said to me, I'm a veteran. I served in the war. And I served my country there because I wanted to serve my country and my fellow Americans. And I came home and worked for the National Park Service to do the same. And now, as a veteran, my country's not there for me. And I would just say to my colleague and to everyone who's listening, to these men and women, that we make a promise to, that we say we will be there for you when you come home. That does not mean slamming a door in your face. It doesn't mean that you have to wait for hours to get the services that you earned. It doesn't mean that you will be mistreated. It means that we will honor you. And I would thank the senator for his response and just say to him again, do you think we're treating men and women in this country as great Americans by the actions that are being taken by this administration?
Thank you for the question. No, and I'm just going to read another article that's going to make even clearer the point you just laid that's so strong and so important. This is from Axios, How White House Firings Are Hurting Veterans. The Trump administration's big cuts to the federal government are hitting one group particularly hard, the country's veterans. Why it matters? Many of those who served in the military derive a sense of purpose and belonging from their government work, viewing it as a way to serve their country and help their peers outside of active duty. The big picture. It's not clear yet how many vets have been fired or will be. Last year, veterans made up 28% of the federal workforce, 28%. Per federal data, a far bigger share than the 5% in the private sector. About 36% of the vets working in civil service, more than 200,000 in total, are disabled or have serious health conditions per federal data. 36% of the vets working in civil service are disabled vets. This is the largest attacks on veteran employment in our lifetime, says William Attig, executive director of the Union Veterans Council, a large group that represents many of these workers. Atig, who was deployed in Iraq from 2003 to 2009, has been talking to newly unemployed members trying to get a tally of everyone whose job was lost. Zoom in now. Some veterans still holding on to their jobs for now are waiting for the hammer to drop. We're being smeared as leeches, but I just want to serve my country and provide for my family, an employee at the Department of Defense who's a disabled veteran, and requested anonymity because he didn't want to put his job at risk. Talk about free speech. We're being smeared as leeches, says a disabled veteran who stood for us. And he was thrilled to land his job, he said a few months ago, but is anxiously waiting to see if he'll be one of the more than 5,000 workers at the Pentagon that the Pentagon said it would fire next week. Privately now, GOP lawmakers are growing uneasy with the cuts to veterans. I know this because I know the heart of so many of my Republican colleagues. Politico reports adding that vets have been disproportionately affected by firings, and again, GOP lawmakers are growing uneasy about it. The White House did not say how many veterans have been fired. At least one department, the Department of Interior, has rapidly carved out an exception for him. President Trump has consistently stood up for our brave men and women, delivering crucial reforms that improve VA health care, said White House spokesperson Anna Kelly in an email. There are a few reasons government work attracts vets. The federal government has a veterans preference. Put simply, when deciding among a group of qualified candidates, they're first in line. I think that's right. You'd have to jump through a lot of hoops to not hire a veteran, said a former official. With more veterans working in government, more feel welcome to work among people who understand them. Others are drawn to their retirement benefits. Years of military service counts towards your federal pension. Plus, though, many of these folks feel drawn to mission-driven employment. Most veterans feel like they're putting on another uniform when they go work in other federal agencies. These jobs are a crucial piece of the puzzle in most military life, he says, adding that it's also a key part of suicide prevention for this at-risk group. One of the most important things you can do for a veteran is help them with a job. How can we expect to maintain what is in America an all-volunteer force if we fail to show those folks willing to serve how we care for our service members when they come home? Slashing more than 83,000 jobs from the VA alone, it's clear that these cuts are going to have a disproportionate impact on veterans, veteran contractors, and the services they receive. I'm angry about these cuts, but most of all, it should make all Americans feel a sense of sadness. We ask our veterans to sacrifice so much, and we all know, who know veterans, it's not just the veterans, it's also veteran families that make that sacrifice, that share in that service, that share in that commitment. And these veterans, some of the more talented, dedicated leaders I know, they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it because they're called to serve. You know how many people jumped into service after 9/11? Friends of mine rushed to join the military, to serve in Iraq and Afghanistan. And now they're home, many of them with invisible wounds, many of them with visible wounds. And the services they rely on for their health care, the services they rely on as lifelines, the services they rely on often that give them hope and opportunity, not compounding their trauma. This is now being attacked by a president who's not keeping his promises. He says he values veterans, but the facts are different. She devoted her life to serving the U.S., then DOJ targeted her. It has been 6 days since Joy Marver was locked out of her office at the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, 5 days since she checked herself into hospital for emergency psychiatric care, and 2 days since she sent a letter to her supervisors, "Please, I'm confused. Can you help me understand?" Now, she followed her wife into the storage room of their house outside of Minneapolis, searching for answers no one could give her. A half dozen bins held the remnants of 22 years spent in service to the U.S. government, first as a sergeant first class in Iraq, then as a disabled veteran, and finally as a VA support specialist in logistics. She devoted her career to a system that had always made sense to her, but now nobody seemed to know whether she had officially been laid off, or for how long, or even why. Are you sure you never got an email? Asked her wife, Mickey Jo Carlson, 49. How would I know? Asked Maver, 45. They deleted my account. Maybe it's because you were still probationary. My boss said I was exempt, Marver said. I was supposed to be essential. In the last few months, more than 30,000 people across the country were fired by President Trump's new initiative called the Department of Government Efficiency, a historic reduction of the federal workforce that has been all the more disruptive because of its chaotic execution. Entire agency divisions have been cut without explanation or mistakenly fired and then rapidly rehired, resulting in several lawsuits and mass confusion among civil workers. After a court ruled last week that many of the firings were illegal, the government began reinstating workers even as the Trump administration appealed the decision and promised more layoffs. The VA alone said it planned to cut about 80,000 more jobs this year, including tens of thousands of veterans. And for Marver, the shock of losing her job was eclipsed by the disorientation of being repeatedly dismissed and belittled by the government she served. She had watched on TV as Trump's billionaire advisor, Elon Musk, took to the stage at a political conference wielding a chainsaw to the beat of rock music, slicing apart the air with what he called his chainsaw for bureaucracy. She had listened to Trump's aides and allies deride federal employees for being lazy, parasitic, unaccountable, and essentially wasting taxpayer money in their quote-unquote fake jobs. In Marver's case, that job had meant helping to retrain soldiers for civilian work and coordinating veteran burials while earning a salary of $53,000 a year. Here's the note I got a little while after I was hired, Marver told Carlson, pulling a form letter from the government. You represent the best of who we are as Americans, it read. You could have chosen to do anything with your talents, but you chose public service. Kind of boilerplate, but it's nice, Carlson said.
Madam Chair. Senator Booker, will you yield for a question?
Before I yield, I just want to acknowledge my friend in the chair, and she's cracking a tight whip, so I appreciate you following the rules here. I got to read this now, and then I'm eager to get your question because you are one of the few people I knew before I got to the Senate.
That is what I wanted to talk about.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't yield. But I didn't yield for a question. I still you can't say anything, sir.
Oh.
The parliamentarian will jump all over you. I have the floor. So much power, it's going to my head.
Senator, will you yield for a question?
Oh, man. Known you for like 25 years. I wanted to talk about you, but you're being so insistent. I'll reward your insistence and say I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
And let me ask you, Senator Booker, I can't ask you now. Through the chair, may ask you directly how long a question you would like. I'm happy to provide you with a 5-minute question or a 5-hour question. It depends entirely on
I actually believe that you would go a 5-hour question to try to help me power through. Senator, we've been at this for.
My wife Susan would.
I love your wife Susan. I love you and your wife Susan, but I love your children more.
Well, that's why I came down here. You know, when I remember.
Is this a question? Because I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
This is a question, please.
Okay, let's make it a 7-minute question.
This is a question. And I would say to the senator from New Jersey and to the presiding officer, thank you very much for being here and for enduring this. When I started here, I was sitting in the chair all the way to the right of where you are today, Senator Booker. And remember the day you walked in to be sworn in, you came through those doors right there, and I had a huge smile on my face because I knew when you were walking through those doors, when you were walking into this chamber, you would bring with you the kids that you used to work for in Newark, New Jersey. And the reason I knew that was that when you were working for the kids in Newark, New Jersey, as the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, I was working for the kids in Denver as the superintendent of the Denver Public Schools. And at that time in our country's history, we were engaged in a pretty profound effort to try to make better the schools in our respective communities. Not that everything was perfect, but we were trying to drive achievement for the kids in Newark and the kids in Denver, and we talked about it over many years. And here you walked into this chamber, a place where it would be easy to imagine has long had the habit of treating America's kids like they're someone else's kids, not like they're America's kids. I know that because if the kids were in America were represented by the 100 desks that are in this Senate, roughly 9 of them would be graduating with a college degree in our country. 9 of these desks. If we thought about the rates of literacy, the failure in our country to be able to teach people how to read or do mathematics, decade after decade after decade, the proficient students would consume just a few desks in this place, and everybody else would not be able to do basic levels of reading and basic levels of math. And but here you were, somebody who understands that, and here you are, somebody who understands that. And one of the very first projects you and I worked on, and this is coming to my question, was the child tax credit. This was an effort to turn back 30 or 40 years of trickle-down economics that said that what we're going to do is cut taxes for the richest people in the country and just have it trickle down to everybody else. Some people don't know what that means, and if I could, let me just say what that actually means. For you to understand what that tax policy is, that tax policy that Donald Trump has pursued now twice, once when he was president before, and now again, you have to imagine that there is a mayor in Newark, or there is a mayor in Denver, or a mayor in San Diego, or in Miami, who is saying to the people that live in his community, I have an idea. I'm going to go out and borrow more money than we have ever borrowed before as a community. I'm going to go out and borrow a ton of money. And your constituent and my constituents would say, wait a minute, Mayor, wait a minute, that makes me nervous. What are you borrowing all that money for? Because I'm worried about the fiscal condition of my city and my town. This conversation would happen in every city and every town in Colorado or New Jersey, whether they're Democratic or Republican mayors. You'd have to answer the question, what are you spending the money on? What are you going to borrow all this money for? Is it for our parks? No. Is it for our schools? No. Is it to give mental health services to kids who desperately need it? No. Is it for our roads and bridges, our infrastructure? No. Are you going to do something important for our water systems? No. What is the answer? What are you going to do with that money that you are borrowing, that you are mortgaging our kids' future? What is this important thing that you're going to do with it? The answer is we're going to give it to the 2 richest neighborhoods in New Jersey or Newark or Denver, and we're going to expect that it's going to trickle down to everybody else. That is the theory. That is what trickle-down economics is. That is what the Trump tax plan is, and there's a reason why no mayor in America has ever done it, because you would be run out on a rail. Because you couldn't explain it. You're going to borrow money from the kids of our police officers, our firefighters, our teachers, in order to cut taxes for the richest people in the community in the hope that they'll buy a little bit of an extra, luxury, and that's going to somehow generate economic activity for everybody else. it is demonstrably true that that has never worked. And by the way, these tax cuts, I say the presiding officer and everybody else within the sound of my voice, have literally never, ever come close to paying for themselves. That is a complete lie. That's why the Congressional Budget Office says this is going to blow a $4.6 trillion hole in our deficit. And for what? To give tax cuts to the richest people in America when they need them least? And when the income inequality is as great as it has been in our country since the 1920s, which brings me to my question. My cherished colleague from New Jersey, what was it we were trying to do with the child tax credit? There were a lot of people who believed that we couldn't even get it passed, that we couldn't even get the IRS to administer it. And then we did get it passed during part of the Biden administration, and lo and behold, more than 90% of the families in New Jersey got a tax cut. Lo and behold, more than 90% of the families in Colorado got a tax cut, not waiting for a trickle down from the wealthiest people, but they got a tax cut directly that did what? Cut in half. Cut in half the childhood poverty rate in America. In the richest country in the world, for one moment, we said we don't have to accept this level of childhood poverty as a permanent feature of our democracy or a permanent feature of our economy. We can do something different than that. And Senator Booker, that is what you said when you were mayor of Newark. We don't have to accept these generational outcomes of poverty or of poor schools or of lead in the water. We can do something different, and that's what you've brought to the United States Senate as well. The tragedy from my perspective is there are many tragedies about the election of Donald Trump, and by the way, I'll say again on this floor, I don't blame him for getting elected president. You know, he ran and he won. Those of us that were trying to offer a different vision have something to explain about why we were not successful. But one thing I am certain of is that the kids in Newark and the kids in Denver are completely invisible to our current president. That he is not concerned with their welfare or even loses a minute's sleep over the next generation. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, this isn't a numbers and cents question, because I know even though you don't look tired, I'm sure you must be tired after all these hours and hours and hours, but can you talk a little bit, Senator, about how a society should be judged with respect to how we treat the next generation of Americans, how a tax bill should be judged by how we treat the next generation of Americans, how almost nothing else matters except what we do with respect to the next generation of Americans. I can tell you that my daughters, Caroline, Helena, and Ann, understand better than most your commitment to them and to your commitment to their generation, because you've been such an inspiration to them, not just today, but thank you for what you're doing, but for basically their entire lifetimes.
Well, thank you for the question. My long time friend, one of the folks I've known the longest, who I get to serve with, and what you did for me when I came here is you and Sherrod Brown, who sat right there by the door, you let Bennett and Brown become Bennett Brown Booker, 3 Bs, and joined together with some of the most extraordinary House members and Brother Warnock, and fight for the child tax credit. And it took years, but we found our opening when we called Ron Klain together before the election was even settled and said, please, this is the best thing our country can do is to expand the child tax credit, make it fully refundable. Because we knew, as you said, it would give the overwhelming majority, between 80 and 93%, depending on what state you are, of the people in those states, we expanded the earned income tax credit, it would give them all a tax break. It was, inarguably, one of the greatest tax cuts in the last 50 years. And it cut child poverty in America nearly in half. And child poverty is a moral obscenity. Child poverty is violence against children. Violence. And here's the thing that you and I both know from the research. Every dollar you spend in raising a child above the poverty line, you return to society between $5 and $7 in economic growth and activity, or in lesser costs, because kids above the child poverty line have, for example, less visits to the emergency room. I just don't understand how we are a nation, again, the wealthiest nation that has one of the highest child poverty rates. It makes no sense, 0 sense. When we proved once and for all with that 1 year effort, because we couldn't make it permanent, we were short 1 vote in this body, we proved forever in America that child poverty is a policy choice, not an inevitable reality. And so you ask the great question, why in a nation that was founded on men that studied virtue, the ideals of virtue, they were imperfect geniuses, but they really struggle with moral philosophy. We have the power, we've proven it, to cut child poverty in half. What's the argument against it? Wasteful spending? Come on. Giving trillions of dollars of tax cuts to the wealthiest in America, I'm sorry, it's wasteful spending, especially if it ends up blowing a hole. Those tax cuts don't pay for themselves. Trump won tax cuts, didn't. Renewing them won't. Doing the same thing over and over again and thinking you're going to get different results is the very definition of insanity. You are one of the most passionate. I remember a stem winder of a speech you gave in this body. You were so angry. I love it when it's Bennett Unchained. You were so angry when you started talking about the horrible policies of this nation that has eaten away the inheritance of children to come. Why you went off on the trillions of dollars spent on stupid foreign wars, where our brave men and women fought for this country, but this country made bad mistakes in these long wars. You talked about the money we spent there, and you talked about the first time in American history, common sacrifice every war before that, not just the men and women who were brave enough to go out and fight. You said the first time in American history that we said the only people that are going to bear a burden are the people that are going to go. The rest of you get tax cuts. George Bush, first time ever, we went to war and we gave tax cuts from the Civil War to the Revolutionary War to World War I to World War II. It was a common collective effort. My grandmother talked with pride about victory gardens and pride about war bonds. Everybody pitched in. And so here we are at another crossroads. And is America going to tolerate? Is America going to tolerate this idea? That we're going to give extraordinary tax cuts to the overwhelmingly, disproportionately will accrue to the wealthiest amongst us. For what? If I was a mayor, I'd have to answer it. So I appreciate your question, but I also appreciate your moral indignation. I really do. I keep saying over and over again, elevating the voices of Americans on this floor, elevating the point, I hope, that we can't keep doing things like this as business as usual. These are real issues, not of right or left or right or wrong. This is a moral moment in America. And you point out a very clear choice we have when we talk about our tax policy. It should reflect our values. Thank you, sir.
Will the senator yield for a question?
For Jack Reed, I would do just about anything. So I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
First, thank you for continuing to highlight the harm that's being done by the Trump administration on average Americans, working Americans. Flouting the law, withholding federal funds, illegally shutting federal agencies, ruining long-standing alliances, increasing prices, taxes on American consumers. It goes on and on and on. Last week, the Department of Health and Human Services announced that it would fire 20,000 employees. Those cuts appear to be taking shape right now. Is the senator aware that there are reports that thousands of HHS staff have been locked out of their offices this morning?
To answer the senator's question, I've been on the floor since last night. I haven't read any news reports, but when you say that am I aware of thousands and thousands of HHS employees who've been laid off of their jobs, I'm not aware of it. I'm not surprised. The question isn't, is Donald Trump going to lay more people off? The question isn't, is Donald Trump going to lay more disproportionately veterans off? The question is what are we going to do to stop it when it isn't thoughtful, reasonable cuts, when he talks about the people he's cutting as leeches, demeans and degrades their commitment to service and their noble obligations. We were told that HH&S would be about making America healthy again. And I haven't seen that. I've seen them cut services to give access to children to fresh and healthy foods. I've seen them cut regulations on polluters that make our air quality worse, which hurts people with emphysema, with asthma, with other respiratory diseases. In fact, a lot of the actuarials show more Americans die when polluters are allowed to go back to polluting more. I could go through the things they're doing that are not making our water healthier and safer, not making our air healthier, safer, not making more access to health care that stops and treats chronic disease, not giving access to healthy. And so these cuts, they don't surprise me, but they hurt me. They hurt me. These are Americans. These are disproportionately veterans. And I thank you for speaking up for them today.
If the senator would yield for another question.
I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
President Trump and the Secretary of HHS, Secretary Kennedy, are, as I indicated and made you aware, they are firing a host of people today. But the critical staff functions will be undercut. For example, the Low-Income Energy Assistance Program. And the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, they will focus on worker safety. LIHEAP, as you know, provides essential support to literally keep people warm in the winter and cool in the summer in our southern states. And with LIHEAP undercut like that, there will be effects. People will become unhealthy, in fact, possibly couldn't even pass away and perish. NIOSH, on the other, is an agency that looks after 164 million people in this country so they're safe. And we all know, we all remember back all those stories about the Gilded Age, which sometimes I think the administration wants to bring back, where children labored in shops, where garment workers were killed in fires because there was no way to get out. All the exits were sealed. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health prevents that. And work-related industries, injuries and illnesses cost our economy about $250 billion annually. So that will double, triple, quadruple. And we're seeing all sorts of reports about the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control at CDC. They do critical work. They're under the gun. We're seeing reports that the director of the FDA Center for Tobacco Products has been fired. We can see that President Trump and Secretary Kennedy would rather stand up for big tobacco than for young kids who get hooked on it and it ruins their health. These are just a few of the cuts. And I want you to, I know you're aware of these, I know you're focused on these. They're going to destroy years of progress. And basically, it's being shouldered by working Americans. You know, nobody who lives in Mar-a-Lago needs LIHEAP heating. Nobody who dines at Mar-a-Lago needs occupational health support. But the waiters do, and the grounds people do. So, Senator, just your comments and thoughts.
I so appreciate the question from my friend. I really think empathy is a superpower, and you are Superman in that category. Because you're thinking about the people affected. We throw these acronyms down here, and they sound like government programs, but you meet with the people. I remember when I was starting out my political career in service in Newark, and I had this dear friend named Kim, and she was one of these people that worked trying to sign people up for LIHEAP. And the stories that would affect her of people that was a lifeline for them to have a little bit of resources to help them get their energy costs in a place where they could afford heat in the winter and some air in the summer. Stories of elders and vulnerable. I don't understand how we can be a nation with so much wealth and abundance and we haven't figured out a way to design a system where when you invest in the well-being of people, people thrive. Kids growing up in quality housing with great public schools, with clean air, without lead in their water, above the poverty line. You know what I love about young people in this country is their resiliency. I meet these beautiful children with light in their eyes, and all they need is a little fertile ground, and they go beyond our imagination in what they can achieve. And so here we are taking our national treasure. The resources being paid into our taxes are our national treasure. And what do we invest in? And what do we do with it? Well, we're running up more debt. We're not going to pay for these tax cuts that are overwhelmingly going to go to the wealthiest. But we're taking all these things that people rely on, from our veterans to our seniors to our disabled to expectant moms. We're just taking as much as we can to defer as much of this gross tax cuts that go disproportionately to the wealthy. And so again, I return to where I've been for closing in on 19 hours. I go back to, what are we going to do about it? It can't be business as usual. There are too many things we've already covered that show that this is a moral moment in America. Where do we stand? It's time, as John Lewis, as I keep repeating, he says it's time to get into good trouble, necessary trouble, to redeem the soul of our nation. And when you're talking about, goes directly to the soul, what do we stand for? Who do we stand for? We should stand for each other. Thank you, sir.
Will the senator from New Jersey yield for a question?
To my dear friend, I yield for a question while retaining the floor, and I thank you for being here. I thank you for your leadership. I thank you for what you stand for, and I look forward to your question.
Well, I so appreciate the senator from New Jersey trying to articulate the urgency of this moment. And I think that I know you've discussed many things in the last, I don't know how many hours it is, but it's been many, many hours. And, you know, we just had a hearing this morning related to the markup of the Social Security nominee. And we're just trying to find out because a whistleblower said that he was involved in helping Doge. And we're here today trying to bring attention to the American public that people are trying to rearrange essential services, contractual obligations, things like Social Security or Medicaid or even Medicare, by basically saying, well, we have this efficiency strategy, when in reality, they're over there with numbers just trying to carve something out of the budget, billions of dollars out of Social Security efficiency, or billions and billions and billions of dollars out of Medicaid, which would really come right out of our hospitals who are saying they don't even think they could stay open. But this notion of Social Security, I don't know if you've heard that not only are they closing offices and cutting jobs, they're asking people to re-register. So my constituent, who they basically said was dead, was not dead. He wanted his Social Security. So not only did they not give him his check in January, they tried to claw back checks from the previous months out of his bank account. And even though this has got national press and attention, you would think that everybody on the other side would be like, no, that's not what we're trying to do. Even though the president in the State of the Union said all these people were getting Social Security checks when my constituent is standing in line with less and less staff trying to get his Social Security. And guess what? They're still at it. As of last Friday, they were still at not giving him his Social Security. So what are we unleashing on America? What are we unleashing that even, and I don't know whether you address these Social Security issues in your statements. I so appreciate you emphasizing the urgency here, because this is the dismantling of contractual agreements between the American people and the people's body that we're here to represent them and stand up for it, and people are acting like they don't care. So you are here in an extraordinary athletic achievement, thank you. Makes your Stanford days look like nothing, right? You've achieved this great long effort to bring illumination to the American people that they're getting screwed over the fact that these cuts are not some efficient way to deliver better service, but in Social Security, they're undermining Social Security. So have you heard of these cases, the whistleblower issue, and others, and do you believe that that's what we should be paying attention to, that before we get a vote on Mr. Bisignano, that we should be finding out what whistleblowers are saying and his involvement related to DOJ and making sure that Social Security checks are protected?
I thank you for the question, my friend and my chairwoman. I did talk about this, but it is so worth repeating. At some point in the night, we covered Social Security, and we read story after story after story of senior citizens that are frightened and afraid that the President of the United States would stand in a joint address and attack Social Security, make fun of it with lie after lie after lie about millions and millions of people getting fraudulent checks, when the people who do the fact-checking and even the Social Security folks themselves say that it's a minuscule amount of people getting checks, and usually it's an overpayment. But that didn't stop there. Elon Trump called it a Ponzi scheme. Elon Musk called it a Ponzi scheme. The richest man in the world and the most powerful man in the world, himself a billionaire, are attacking the program that millions and millions of our senior citizens rely on. I read letters of people that say, don't forget about the people who are disabled who rely on SSI, begging us to remember and speak their names and tell their stories. A lot of fear, a lot of terror, a lot of insecurity. But we spoke about this on the floor, that their benefits are already being cut. What do I mean by that? Well, if you are cutting Social Security offices, as one of our colleagues said from New Hampshire, in a rural area, forcing people to have to drive 100 miles if they have a problem, they can't talk on the phone, or the waits on the phones. I read an article from the Wall Street Journal, no left-wing mag, from the Wall Street Journal, talking about how the customer service is going downhill because of the cuts that they're making, and now you're forcing seniors. We read letters from 85-year-olds, 90-year-olds, 93-year-old. They're going to drive 100 miles? I read letters from Social Security workers who now work in inadequate spaces with inadequate staff, unable to do their job that they love. They're not leeches. They're not people that should be demeaned or degraded by the most powerful people in our land. They are public servants who love their jobs and want to serve seniors, but now can't do it because they cut before they thought.
Question, because
I will yield for a question while retaining the floor.
I thank the senator from New Jersey. The issue that I think is not being illuminated enough are the sheer numbers here. In my state of Washington, 1.4 million people on Social Security, 1.8 million people on Medicaid. So you're talking about a big federal relationship. Now, I know that some people in the I actually worked in the private sector. I can tell you one thing about the private sector. The bigger it gets, usually the more inefficient it gets. It just happens. Big organizations can be inefficient. So just because the federal government is the government doesn't mean that Social Security and Medicaid are fraught with fraud. In this case, my constituent's not even getting his check and no one is responding. And you would think with all this commotion that Social Security would want to jump right on it and fix it, but they're not. And the question I have for the Senator of New Jersey is, in my state, I have, as I said, nearly 1.8 million people who are on Medicaid, and the same problem is now where our colleagues are trying to say they're going to get $880 billion out of the energy and commerce budget of the House of Representatives, when in reality, like 90% of that money is Medicare or Medicaid, and if Medicare is supposedly off the table, then the majority of that is going to come from Medicaid. So in my state, I'm hearing from hospitals that that means they could close. That means essential Medicaid services that are used even in our jails or for fentanyl treatment, or Medicaid that is used as a Obamacare expansion for health care, that so many literally red Republican states, Republican governors have said, we want that. The governor of Idaho, yes, we want that. That's an expansion of Medicaid, and it's successfully working at providing health care to millions of Americans. But now our colleagues are entertaining a notion that they could cut this system. They're not really making it clear. So again, the illumination of you showing the urgency is like a big flag that we're trying to show to the American people. This is not a drill. This is now. This is happening. The beginnings of it are happening. And now this debate that's going to ensue is going to be a massive cut into those programs unless the American people wake up. Now, are your states, and are you hearing this in New Jersey about the Medicaid cuts, the impacts on hospitals, on the delivery system, on essential services?
I cannot emphasize to you strongly enough, we decided to start this whole thing at 7 p.m. last night with Medicaid. And we read story after story after story after story of people who are Medicaid beneficiaries, who are terrified, who are afraid, who didn't say if they cut $880 billion, if they diminish the cuts in any way to their services, they're holding together their lives in this fragile financial equilibrium that one little tug of a transportation service, one little tug of a home health care giver, it all crumbles. They're terrified and afraid. Some of the Americans are dealing with the greatest challenges, not of their own making. Some of them working full-time jobs and getting an injury. It costs extraordinary amounts of chaos to their lives. So yes, I read from the people who are recipients. I read from the people who run hospitals, from rural hospitals to urban hospitals to level 1 trauma centers, who all said that if they cut hundreds of billions of dollars, that it'll affect them. I did something really important. I read from Republican governors and Democratic governors, because I keep saying over and over, America, this is not right or left, it's right or wrong. It's not a partisan moment. It's an American moment. It's a moral moment. I read voices from Republicans specifically, Republican governors in Medicaid expansion states. They have this trigger. You know this, many states, that if the funding from the federal government ever dips below 90%, boom, Medicare expansion is over. Millions of people in financial crisis, in healthcare crisis. What is it going to take for us to say no? With such a firm voice, such a chorus of conviction, thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans, red, white, and blue, every state saying, do not do this for no good reason but to give the majority of your tax cuts to billionaires like Elon Musk. It makes no sense. Who are we as a country? This is not normal times. This is not usual. We should be standing up, because I read the stories of Republicans who run hospitals, Republicans who are governors, who are all saying, don't do this, don't do this. Senator Padilla, I was teasing, I'm not yielding yet, Senator Padilla, I was teasing that man over there named Bennett, that he and I have known each other for years, but you and I have known each other longer. I knew the senator from Washington before I got here, mutual friends. So these are 3 people that were friends of mine before I met this institution. Had Coons here, I have all 4. You, though, I knew longer than Bennett and longer than the great senator from Washington and the chairwoman. We met in 1998, 99, around then. We were both city council people. And the dear friend, a beautiful man who introduced us, told me before we walked in your office that you were a rising star. You were a man of deep decency. that you were going to do extraordinary things in your career, and he did not overstate the fact. You're one of my close friends, and I definitely yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Thank you, and let the record reflect that he said the exact things, same things, probably better things about you, and he was absolutely correct. But I couldn't help but interject right at the moment where I did, because once again, your passion is coming through. There's been, well, first of all, I tremendously admire what you've been doing here on the floor of the Senate today, starting with last night. And as I've been watching off and on, there's these moments where your empathy and your sympathy and your care and concern is coming through. You can't help it. It's who you are. There's been other moments as you've been talking about some of the key issues and dynamics of this current political climate that we're in, where your passion is coming through, and at times anger. I know it because I've seen it. I know it because we're getting calls in my office about this. I know it because if you monitor comments and commentary on social media about what my colleague is doing here on the Senate floor, some people have asked, why is he so angry? Why, I'd like to say here, right now, that Senator Booker has every right to be angry because of what's going on. I know I'm angry with so much of what's going on, and the American people have every right to be angry with what's going on, because none of what we're seeing come out of the Trump White House is normal. But every day, this approach of flooding the zone with more and more extreme actions runs the risk of making people grow numb to these attacks. And we certainly can't surrender to the feeling of just being overwhelmed by their tactics. And so I want to thank the senior senator from New Jersey for doing what he's doing to shake and awaken the conscience of our country. Now, as I listen to my colleague talk about the real dangers of the Trump administration, what it poses for our nation, I also reflect on what it means for our environment. Because I know it hits home for many folks, but especially in my home state of California. Look, California, many of you have come to visit time and again, is home to some of those beautiful parks and natural wonders in the nation. But if you grew up in Southern California, like I did, you also know there's a flip side to this climate discussion.
Definitely feeling.
And we lived through the real costs of climate inaction. Now, growing up, I can tell you not just about the smell of diesel exhaust, which I'll never forget, sitting on a school bus going to and from school, or the regular days where school would be shut down early, we'd all be sent home because of the smog, toxic smog in the air in the greater Southern California area. These were concrete reminders of the real threat that emissions pose to our health. California also knows the dangers posed by extreme weather. We know the droughts, we know the floods, and yes, all too often we've come to know wildfires, devastating wildfires like the ones we experienced in Los Angeles County at the beginning of this year. Now, Senator Booker was kind enough to come visit a few weeks ago to tour Altadena, the epicenter, if you will, of the Eaton fire that devastated so many. And I think we'd both agree, and anybody who's visited the area to see for themselves would agree, that you cannot see what happened in and around Altadena and come away unmoved. I can go on and on with examples and reasons to say to you that this is exactly why California for decades has worked so hard against pollution and against the impacts of climate change.
everything from being aggressive on tailpipe emission standards to our ambitious conservation goals. The 30 and 30 goals set out by the Biden administration were modeled after the 30 by 30 goals set out by the state of California. California is also home to the very first Earth Day, which is now celebrated nationally each and every year. But today, much of our progress is now at risk, because just in the first 2 months of this second Trump administration, we've seen nothing but attacks on this progress of environmental protection. The Trump administration has sought to reverse the endangerment finding, which is the most basic finding of climate science, that yes, greenhouse gases harm public health. They've taken the steps of illegally freezing funding that this Congress had previously appropriated. I'm talking about the types of investments that keep our kids in our communities healthy. Now, earlier this month, the EPA, Trump's EPA, announced that they would be rolling back more than 30 environmental rules. By doing so, they're not just going to make Americans less healthy, they're also going to hurt our economy. And it's going to clear the way for China to become the world leader in green technology. So much for America first, if they continue down that road. But even while the Trump administration has refused to fight climate change, it's one thing to not be helpful. They've actually taken a number of steps that are actually harmful and hurtful, make it harder, for example, for states to respond to natural disasters. They've toyed with tying wildfire disaster assistance to political demands. They've proposed eliminating FEMA. They've implemented federal freezes on things like hazardous fuel removal and the hiring of federal firefighters, things that we need to do in the winter months to prepare for the hot and dry summer months when the risk is greatest. They've even brazenly opened up dams and flooded portions of the Central Valley to pretend President Trump was helping with the Los Angeles wildfires, when the fact is those fires were contained when they released this water that's no longer available in the hot, dry summer months. So they're not just refusing to act or to help, they're making matters worse for states like California and many others. So that's what this fight is about. Our fight for the environment is about America's health and safety. It's about American jobs, and it's about America's future. With all that being said, my question to Senator Booker is this: for the next generation of Americans, for the young people who are tuning in and wondering, well, what is it that I can do? Do I have a voice? Do I have any power? What would you say to them? How can they take action?
I love you for that question, my friend. And I just want to talk about anger, because I've been all over the place. I read these letters and they make me sad. I read these letters, they make me angry. I read these letters, they make me embarrassed that we're a country where people have to rend their pride and beg for help because of the little teeny modicum of support they get from a service like Medicaid. But I've been saying over and over again, as I've tried to learn from my elders, if I've tried to learn from the heroes I revere, that I learned from my parents that anger is not a bad emotion. It's what you do with that emotion that's important. Does it consume you? Does it drive you to hate other people, or do you allow it to fuel you? Because it was ferocious love that had ancestors of all of ours in this country make it through the insults, no Irish need apply, the injuries of Japanese internments. It's what do you do with those feelings? You're not defined by what happens to you, you're defined by how you choose to respond. So I tell people, anger, if you're not angry, let that fuel you. Well, what about the heartbreak that I feel? Well, I get emotional sometimes because I read a letter and something in it makes me remember somebody I know, or to feel the hurt of constituents begging for help, and it breaks my heart. But I tell you, if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. Because there's so much heartbreak and fear and pain in a nation where people are seeing their economic hopes and dreams of maybe buying a home or having the money to help their kids with school or to meet their basic needs, where so many Americans are one flat tire, one $400 hit to their account, and they're suddenly doing payday loans or having to struggle to find a way through. There's so much heartbreak in this country. Great love means you make yourself vulnerable to having that heartbreak. But the heart's this powerful tool that even when it's broken, it still beats. And what about people that are afraid? I get afraid sometimes. I think about this legislation. If it goes through, what's going to happen in my state? I know the hospitals. I know the recipients. But you're telling me, look at our history. Is there anybody in American history that you revere that didn't face extraordinarily fear? Because you cannot have great courage without great fear. Fear is a necessary precondition to courage. And so you ask me, my friend, what can people do? I want to remind people, as I've said before on this floor, to remember the truth that I heard before I came here, that change does not come from Washington, it comes to Washington by the people who demand it. I said this earlier. Do you think that we got suffrage in this country because a bunch of men on this Senate floor right here put their hands in and said, hey, fellas, on the count of three, women get the right of vote. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. No, that's not how it happened. It happened because of Alice Paul. She was a young person from New Jersey. She broke with the course of human events. Alice Paul, one of my greatest heroes, you know what she did? She caused a heck of a lot of good trouble. Necessary trouble. She is the first American ever, young American in her early 20s, the first American ever to protest in front of the White House. She broke with the older, more mature suffrage organizations and went to the White House and did what she called a silent retreat, protest. She held up signs quoting President Woodrow Wilson's own words about freedom and equality and say, aren't they true for me? Like a great black woman would later say, ain't I a woman? Don't I deserve rights? You don't think she was afraid? Let me tell you how afraid she was. Hundreds came out to jeer her, blocking the street, and then they arrested her for obstructing public passage. And then what do you do with a strong, powerful woman? You say that she's crazy, and you throw her in an insane asylum. Before Gandhi, sitting in jail before Gandhi, Alice Paul, this young American from New Jersey, goes on a hunger strike. And they don't honor her hunger strike. They shove tubes down her throat, crack eggs into the tube, force feeding her, and thank God for the First Amendment, which is under attack here in America. The freedom of the press, under attack here in America. Look at the dragging the journalist Jeffrey Goldberg right now for doing what? Getting the highest security officials in the land, just showing them the laws that they were breaking. A journalist covered what Alice Paul did. She gets out of jail because of public outrage. She goes back to protesting in front of the White House, and Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States, finally comes out and joins her in supporting suffrage. You don't think she was afraid, angry, heartbroken, but she did something different. She chose a new and unusual pathway to show that this is not the America I believe in. The poetry of Langston Hughes. America never was America to me, but I swear this oath, America will be. The poetry of Langston Hughes. There's a dream in this land with its back against the wall. To save a dream for one, we must save the dream for all. It's what you do with those emotions that matters. Does it call you to greater service? Does it call you to greater sacrifice? Does it call you to greater love? And let me say one more thing. As we were speaking, I just wanted to bring this up. You know I love history. And this is one of my favorite letters, Alex, my colleague, Senator Padilla. It's one of my favorite letters in all of American history, because an obscure, unknown American, obscure and unknown, would never have been known, writes a letter to a powerful, powerful man. This obscure American woman that nobody know or would have heard of, ever, if somebody didn't hear about her story and write a book. She would be gone, like most of the great heroes in American history, that we don't know their names. It reminded me of the last healthcare debate when Donald Trump tried to take away the ACA, and how many amazing, heroic people who I don't remember their names, but rose up and say, no, 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 that got 3 of my colleagues, McCain, Murkowski, and Collins, to change their vote on this floor and stop healthcare being stripped away from 20 million Americans. Well, here is what I mean. It's not the powerful people with titles and celebrity and offices and billions of dollars that have ever shaped this country. What shapes this nation is hard-working, determined Americans who say, I'm going to redeem the dream of America. I'm going to heal the soul of this country. I'm going to demand that we do better, that we rise higher, that we make change happen. What can you do? That you ask if you're a young person? I love this letter. It's written by Frederick Douglass to an unknown person that would have never been heard of if it wasn't for this book. And he writes to his friend, I'm glad to know that the story of your eventful life has been written by a kind lady, and the same is soon to be published. You ask for what you do not need from me, Frederick Douglass writes. You call upon me for a word of commendation. I need such words from you far more than you could need them from me. He says to this unknown woman, especially where your superior labors and devotion to the cause of the lately enslaved of our land are known as I at least know them. The difference between us is very marked, says the great Frederick Douglass, one of the most known people. He was the most photographed man, period, in the 1800s. The difference between us is very marked, Frederick Douglass says. Most that I have done and suffered in the service of our cause has been in public, and I have received much encouragement at every step of the way. You, on the other hand, he says to this woman, you, on the other hand, have labored in private. I have wrought in the day, you in the night. I have had the applause of the crowd and the satisfaction that comes of being approved by the multitude, while the most you have done has been witnessed by a few trembling, scared, and footsore bondsmen and women whom you have led out of the house of bondage, and whose heartfelt God bless you has been your only reward. The midnight sky and the silent stars have been the witnesses of your devotion to freedom and to heroism, accepting of John Brown of much encouragement Accepting of John Brown of sacred memory, I know of no one who has willingly encountered more perils and hardships to serve our enslaved people that you have. Much of what you have done would seem improbable to those who do not know you as I know you. It is to me a great pleasure and a great privilege to bear testimony for your character and your works, and to say to those to whom may come that I regard you in every way truthful and trustworthy. He gave his legitimacy to this book project, Frederick Douglass, to then an unknown woman who did the most heroic things. Her name was Harriet Tubman. How did we get here, America, to this privileged place? Well, we got here because of that incredible infrastructure project that this place didn't fund, called the Underground Railroad, where black Americans and white Americans broke laws, did civil disobedience to stop slavery. How did we get here? We got here because young 20-somethings got upon a bridge named for a grand wizard of the KKK, named the Edmund Pettus Bridge. We got here because they marched. We got here because they were beaten. We got here because they bled, and I may know one or two of the people on that bridge. I may know one of the two of their names, but I am in this body because of them. How did we get here, America? We got here because of people whose names I don't know, who fought At Seneca Falls, how did we get here? Because of people whose names I don't know, who stood at Stonewall. We got here because of people's names I don't know, who were there at Selma. This is the answer to your question. This is an American moral moment. This is the question of where do we stand for health care? Where do we stand for Social Security? Where do we stand for VA benefits? Where do we stand for our American neighbor when the call and commandment of every faith in our land is to love your neighbor? What is the quality of our love, America? Now is the time to get angry, but let that anger fuel you. Now is your time to get scared for what's happening to your neighbors and let that fear bring about your courage. Now is your time to stare at despair and say, you will not have the last word, because I'm going to stand up and at least I can give one person hope in this country. Can I give one person hope in this country? And so what do I want from my fellow Americans? Do better than me. Do better than we in this body. We are flawed and failed people. I see people showing up at our town halls yelling at us, Democrat and Republican, do more. How are you letting this happen? Well, I hate to tell you, we're doing all that I can think of. This is why I'm standing here, to try to give voice to those people. But what is more needed from now is less people sitting on the sidelines, less people being witnesses of American history, and more people determined to make it, to make history, to call to the conscience of this nation, to say, I will not stand for another American to lose their health care for a billionaire. I will not stand for another veteran who's dedicated to stopping the suicide of other veterans to lose their job. I won't stand for the air quality in my community to be made worse because they're letting polluters pollute more. I won't stand for the collective assaults on the Constitution by a man who even the highest judge in our land, a Republican-appointed judge, said, stop threatening and bullying other branches of government. When is it going to be enough? My voice is inadequate. My efforts today are inadequate to stop what they're trying to do. But we, the people, are powerful. We are strong. We have changed history. We have bent the arc of the moral universe. And now is that moral moment again. It's the moral moment again. God bless America. We need you now. God bless America. If you love her, if you love your neighbor, if you love this country, show your love. Stop them from doing what they're trying to do for almost 20 hours. We have laid out what they're trying to do, 20 hours. I want to stand more, and I will, but I'm begging people, don't let this be another normal day in America. Please, God, don't let them take Medicaid away from 10, 20, 30, or 40 million Americans who desperately need it. Don't let them do it. I will yield to my dear friend who I owe an apology. At the last hours of your birthday, as I was preparing for this, I realized that we have a special bond. Before I yield, I want to tell this guy.
The senator was discussing...
Hold on. I yield, but I retain the right to the floor. So I yield, but I retain the right to the floor.
I want to ask some questions about veterans in this country, but before I do so, you talked a lot about courage.
Yes, sir.
And how the world has been changed by people of courage. And I look down at my tie that I have on today.
Yes.
Which has the signers of the Declaration of Independence. And we think of that as a sacred document, an important document in our history, but these people had the courage to put their lives on the line for a radical idea, that people could govern themselves and that we could be independent of a monarch. And they were putting their lives on the line. That's courage. And I'm afraid we have people around here, Senator, who won't put their jobs on the line for the idea of America, for our Constitution, for the guarantees that are provided in the Constitution, for the First Amendment, for the structure of the Constitution, for the independence and separation of powers, which is what provides the protection, the essential protection for our freedoms. But let me ask a question about veterans. We had a hearing this morning in the Veterans Affairs Committee. We were hearing nominees. And I commented that here we are mostly voting on nominees in this extraordinary, historic time as if everything is normal. What I said in the committee this morning was, we're playing Nearer My God to Thee on the deck of the Titanic. And we're talking about all these nominees and all these votes that we're having and not talking about what's happening to our country. And in terms of veterans, here's what's happening. Number one, every time the guy with the chainsaw takes so much pleasure in firing people, if you hear about 1,000 people fired in this government, chances are over 300 of them are veterans. 30% of the federal workforce are veterans. In the VA, I suspect it's even a higher number. So what's happening in the Veterans Administration? The first thing that happened was a hiring freeze. And the hiring freeze affected everybody in the Veterans Administration until somebody said, well, wait a minute, what about doctors and nurses? What about direct care workers? And they said, oh, wait a minute, we didn't mean for that. And that's sort of symbolic of the way this thing is going, because they're not thinking. It's ready, fire, aim, time after time. And so you have a hiring freeze, then they say, oh, well, wait a minute, there's this group we want to do, but then they leave the hiring freeze in place for the people that are working behind the scenes. I think the senator will agree that if nobody's there to answer the phone when a veteran calls to make a claim or make an appointment, that's a denial of benefits, just as if they've cut the benefits. Okay, so 2,400 people fired, and by the way, those people being fired are getting emails that say you're being fired for poor performance. There was no analysis of performance. There was no examination of how they were actually doing or what these people were contributing. It was random. It was people who were on probation. You know why? Because they're easier to fire under our laws. So we've got people being fired ostensibly for poor performance. Think of that as somebody who's put their life on the line for their country because they're a veteran, and then they go to work in public service for the Veterans Administration, and they're being told poor performance, when everybody knows that's a shame. So the next thing that happens is the Veterans Administration announces they're going to fire 83,000 people over the next 6 months. Now, they say, we're going to return to the size of the Veterans Administration it was in 2019. Number one, that's an arbitrary number. Why not 2020 or 2016? It's an arbitrary number. It's not based on any analysis or deep thought. Here's the problem, Senator, and I want you to be ready to respond to this. Here's the problem. There have been 7 major pieces of legislation benefiting veterans since 2019, the biggest of which, of course, is the PACT Act, the largest expansion of veterans benefit program in probably the last 30 or 40 years, and you need people to administer that program. And instead, they're firing people. And the Secretary of the Veterans Administration says, don't worry, it's not going to affect services at all. I don't think that statement passes the straight-face test. And then we have a statement from the VA that says, very proudly, we've canceled 600 contracts, but they won't tell us what they are. I'm on the Veterans Affairs Committee. We don't know what they are. We don't know what the plan is for those 83,000 people that are going to be fired. And I guess my question is, what do you think of an organization that says to a veteran, thank you for your service, you're fired?
Well, as we were talking earlier, the firings are adding up. It's going to be now about 80,000 people from the VA alone. A disproportionate number of them are veterans. And so that is a rollback in service. We already know that veterans in all of the government agencies represent about 24% of the government workers we're talking about that are getting fired. And these are veterans, as I read their stories, that just want to keep serving their country, from the national parks to serving their fellow veterans and helping them get health care. And we are seeing people that get exemplary reviews, and then they're fired as probational workers under the only way they can, according to the law, is to say that they're a bad federal worker. And then they get insult on top of it when the highest or the most powerful man in the world and the richest man in the world Trump and Musk come together and call the guy making $45,000 serving other veterans, they call him a leech, they call him a parasite. And so I hear what you're saying. Like, these are folks that I read their stories. They did things that few Americans would do. They went overseas and served in combat. We had one of our dear friends here who lost her legs in combat, but she stands taller than most all the people in this body. These are the people that are so ingrained in their bodies and minds and souls to serve America, to love America. This president calls somebody like John McCain a sucker. The guy who drafted dodged the draft. And so I hear what you're saying, and one of the things you're just saying is it makes no sense. Nobody came to the Veterans Committee in the Senate who actually approves the resources, establishes the agencies, and should have the say, according to this document, this vaunted, sacred, civically sacred text, our Constitution. And so, what are you to say to them if you don't even know what the plan is? You can't even explain to us what's your plan to making the VA system more efficient. Now, here's the other thing. We passed in this body some of my favorite senators, like John Tester, who I miss so much. Maybe I even just miss bumping into the guy, because he was the only person in the Senate that let me run from one hallway all the way and hit him. I used to joke that it was this test to see what happens when the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. He is a void in this place, but he stood for that PACT Act, gave some of those fiery speeches, and finally we got that bill passed. And we had to add tens of thousands of jobs because of the increased hundreds of thousands of people that were affected from these burn pits or from other challenges. And now we're cutting back 83,000 employees? Patty Murray came down here and said something that affected me in my first weeks as a senator when I in New Jersey sat down with women veterans, and they told me how long they had to wait for gynecological care. And so what is this administration doing in its 83,000 cuts? They're going to improve services to our female veterans? I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Show me I'm wrong. Because we have an Article I duty, oversight, checks and balances. Are we doing that right now? One of the worst things I've seen happen in national security, and by the way, there are national security screw-ups on both parties. Nobody has a monopoly on this. Let's not be overly partisan here. But weeks ago, who are supposed to be the pros and set the example, our national security leadership was using a commercial app to communicate classified documents, and they had it on disappearing messages, so they're violating a law of the land called the Preserving Public Records Act. Now, I've heard from Republicans and Democrats this is outrageous, there should be an investigation. We should be asking common sense questions. Was this a pattern and practice of communication? How many other things that are classified have you been communicating about? There's a lot of really important questions that they should have to answer to. But where are the hearings, folks? I just wonder why this body is shrinking from the articulated duties that we all raised our hands and said we would defend and preserve this Constitution and what it says we should do, what it says our jobs should do. But you're a senator, I'm a senator, I can't tell you what the cut VA plan is. I can't tell you it. They haven't come in here and told us. Are we doing our job? I can't tell you, are we preserving and fighting for national security after one of the biggest national security scandals I've seen since I've been here? They don't have a providence in a partisan way, but they should answer for it. Are we doing our constitutional duty? What about the administration that is ending the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, ending that agency, ending the Department of Education? Do they have the right to do that according to this document? No. Are we saying, hey, we're going to stand up for the people and preserve this document? No. Thank God for the Article III branch of government, because they're being dragged into court, and Republican appointed judges and Democratic appointed judges are saying, can't do it. But you know what Trump is doing? He's ignoring the courts, and then he's demonizing the judges. You know that threats on judges in America, the threats have gone up 400%? You know that I had a federal judge, God bless her, where somebody thought they were going to her house, they did, but she wasn't home, and they murdered her son and shot her husband? And Trump is out there threatening judges dragging them on Twitter or X or whatever he's calling it now? This is America. I know people on both sides of the aisle, we believe in common decency. We believe in respect. We believe that the highest office in the land should represent the best of our values, not the worst, not a guy that we wouldn't even let babysit our kids. And so I don't know what's going on with veterans, but I'm not going to sit by and do nothing. That's why I'm standing here. That's why I read the voices of so many veterans. Let's elevate the voices of the Americans who are being hurt and harmed. Let's talk for them if they can't talk for themselves. Let's tell them that we see you, we love you, and that all of us, we're going to fight for you.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
From you, my friend, who doubled the number of vegans in the Senate. I yield for a question while retaining the floor, and I thank you for being here.
I thank you for being here. Senator Booker, I always knew you were a towering intellect and a phenomenal and passionate speaker and advocate, but I did not know your stamina until today. And I am delighted to join you on the floor and have this opportunity to engage in a dialogue with you.
You can't engage in a dialogue. The parliamentarian is going to stare me down. You can ask me questions.
I stand corrected. I'm happy not to engage in a dialogue with you, but to ask you a question.
And I will yield for a question while retaining the floor.
And let me ask the question this way. I was in the airport yesterday when someone handed me a note that said, please save our country. Please save our country. And I think the genesis of the note was her profound concern over the direction of this country, over the increasingly authoritarian direction of this country and what is happening to the rule of law in America. We look at institution after institution, and we see the guardrails of our democracy coming down. We see an assault on the rule of law unlike anything we have seen in modern history, maybe in the entire history of the United States of America. Each and every institution. And why? Because they can. Because they feel they can. So they're going after the colleges and universities.
Right.
They're going after the institutions of higher learning. This was an attack that was presaged by J.D. Vance years ago in a speech where he talked about the professors are the enemy. They have to go after the seat of learning. So they're going after the universities, and they're using an enormous cudgel. We'll cut off your funds. We'll cut off hundreds of millions in your funds if you do things, if you say things that we in the administration don't like. If you irritate the personal predilection of the president, you will have your funding cut. It is unlawful, it is illegal, and yet they're doing it because they can. They're going after major American law firms because these law firms had the audacity, the unmitigated temerity to hire lawyers or have lawyers who would take on causes inimical to the president's personal interests. So they're going after these firms and they're threatening the livelihood of these firms. We'll close the courthouse doors. We'll cut your clients off from contracts unless you kiss the ring. And of course, it's not just the firms or what they represent. It's everyone who is in need of a lawyer, who now needs to know that if they run afoul of the policy preferences of the administration, they may never get a lawyer. And why are they doing this to law firms? Because they can. And they're going after judges. They're calling for the impeachment of judges. The latest is Judge Boasberg in a case involving the administration grabbing a bunch of people, designating them as part of a Venezuelan gang, and without any due process, without any process at all, taking them to some maximum security prison in El Salvador. And in fact, it would appear doing so even against the court order when the judge said, turn those places around. Now, why are they encouraging the impeachment of a judge? Well, I impeached a judge here. I was a lead manager before there was an impeachment of Donald Trump, or two of them. I led an impeachment of a corrupt judge. It's the same standard of high crimes and misdemeanors. It is not a high crime or a misdemeanor to disagree in a case brought before a federal district court, to disagree with the flawed reasoning of the government. Why are they doing this to judges? Because they can. Because they can. They're going after the press. They're going after the press and saying, if you don't call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, we're going to prevent you from attending press events at the White House or on Air Force One. And why are they doing this to press? This party that claims to be against censorship, why are they doing this to the press? Because they can, and they will continue to do so as long as they believe that they can, until we, and not just we in this body, but we in this country, stand up to them and tell them, no, you can't. No, you can't. If the slogan years ago was, yes, we can, today it has to be, no, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't trample the rights of the American people. No, you can't censor our speech. No, you can't bring the weight of the Justice Department down on the American people. No, you can't. Because we're going to stand together. We universities are not going to let you pick one of us off. We're going to band together. No, we're not going to let you go after the law firms. We're going to band together. No, we're not going to let you go after the press organizations. We're going to demand free speech. Until we come together, until we mobilize in a massive way together to say, no, you can't, no, you can't, they will continue to believe that, yes, they can violate the law with impunity. So my question, Senator Booker, is how do we tell them, no, you can't, not with our country, no, you can't violate the law, violate our values, violate our interests? No, you can't. How do we tell the administration no?
My friend and colleague, I'm hoping that we could figure out thousands of ignition points where Americans can stand up and do that, call to their fellow Americans to do more. I'm not upset at the folks that have been saying to Democratic senators and House members and me and challenging me. I've talked to so many of my constituents who've said, you've got to do more, and all of us have to interrogate ourselves. Because like I said at the very beginning of this, at 7 p.m. on Monday night, I said, we have to say to history where we stood when they were coming after our constitutional principles, where we stood when they were threatening judges to impeach them for making just decisions, where we stood when they were taking law firms and threatening their business unless they came and kowtowed to the big leader, where we stood when they were disappearing people from America with the due process that even Anton Scalia said they should have. Where were you when they came after the health care of the disabled, the health care of the children, the health care of the expectant mothers, the health care of seniors? Where were you when they attacked veterans, laying them off for no justifiable reason and attacking the VA services that they rely on? Where were you when we turned our back on Ukraine? Where were you when we turned our back on our alliances? Where were you when they took the economy down with tariffs? When they took the economy down by threatening it so consumer confidence drops? Where were you? How many things are going on before we answer the question, as it says in Hebrew, he ne ni. He ne ni. Behold, Lord, here I am. And so I confess that I have been imperfect. I confess that I've been inadequate to the moment. I confess that the Democratic Party has made terrible mistakes that have given lane to this demagogue. I confess we all must look in the mirror and say we will do better. And it's not just defining ourselves what we're against. We, the next generation, as the baby boomers are leaving the stage, the last baby boomer president, we have to say that we're going to redeem the dream. We're going to dream America anew. We're going to start talking about bold things that don't divide people, that unite people. Bold things that excite the moral imagination of a country to do better, to go higher, that call us together. This is the time where new leaders in our country must emerge. I'm not talking about senators. I'm talking about citizens. This time of despair and darkness doesn't demand more darkness. We don't need to demean and degrade people who disagree with us. This is a time for us to do something bigger than that. Do you think Martin Luther King in Birmingham hated Bull Connor or said, I'm going to defeat this guy by bringing bigger dogs and bigger fire hoses? No. But he did say, we're going to be so creative, we're going to inspire the moral imagination of the nation, we're going to call to the conscience of the country, we're going to excite them about who we could be. When he went to the March on Washington, he didn't stand there and complain about the demagogues. Listen to his speech. He didn't stand there and demean and degrade the governor of Alabama. He didn't stand there and talk down to Bull Connor. No, he stood before the American people and said, it's not what you're against, it's what you're for. I have a dream. And now it's our generation. We have to redeem the dream. We have to excite people again. He, in the highest office of our land, wants to divide us against ourselves, wants to make us afraid, wants to make us fear so much that we're willing to violate people's fundamental rights. We're willing to go after the speech on college campuses. We're willing to go after law firms, go after the freedom of the press. Don't let him do that. Don't become like him. Be an American that says, I look to the future and I'm excited. Yes, things are tough right now. They're hard, they're scary, they're hurting, but we can overcome this. Our American history, if it's nothing else, American history, if it's nothing else, it is a perpetual testimony to the achievement of impossible things against impossible odds. We are a nation that is great not because of the people that are trying to whitewash our history, to remove great people, Native Americans, black people, and women from our military websites. I don't want a Disneyfication of our history. I don't want to whitewash history. I don't want to homogenize history. Tell me the wretched truth about America, because that speaks to our greatness. And so what do I want people to do? It starts with us, man, and you're doing it. I've seen courage of my colleagues. We're doing it, but we have to do more, and I'm sorry. I'm not going to be a politician that's going to say, we are going to do more for you. I'm going to be a politician. I'm going to be a leader that demands more from America.
Will the senator yield for one last question?
I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Well, this gets to exactly, Senator Booker, your point. I'm optimistic about this country. Notwithstanding this deep, difficult, dark period we are in, I'm optimistic about this country, and I'm optimistic because of something that Alexis de Tocqueville might have said. There is some dispute about whether he actually said this.
The mere fact that you can quote Alexis de Tocqueville, you got me, you have me.
I would like to believe he said this. America is a great country because America is a good country.
Yes,
if he didn't say it, he should have said it, because it is true of this country. It is what makes me an optimist. There are wonderful, beautiful, patriotic people in every state of the union, and they will see us through this, but it does, I think, require all of us to be reminded every now and then of the better angels of our nature. Now, I remember standing in that well during the first impeachment of Donald Trump.
I remember sitting right here in this seat watching you.
And I'll tell you, I had approached that case as a prosecutor would approach a case that I just needed to prove the president guilty of what he was charged with. But it became apparent very quickly that that was not enough. That notwithstanding the abundant evidence of his guilt, I needed to show something more. I needed to show that it was dangerous to keep him in office. Well, tragically, events since have proven my point, but I made a different argument at that point of the trial, which I think gets us to the present moment, which is that truth should matter to us. What's right should matter to us. And even if it doesn't matter to the president, it should matter to us that we are decent.
Yes.
As Americans, we are decent. We are good and decent people. As Americans, that's who we are. We don't believe that when someone is needing medical help that they should be turned away. We don't believe that we should turn our back on our neighbor. We believe in extending our hand. We believe we should be able to disagree with each other without it becoming a personal hatred or antagonism. We're Americans. This is who we are. I do think sometimes we forget. And we have to remind ourselves that, as Elijah Cummings used to say, we're better than this.
Yes.
We are better than this.
Yes, I miss Elijah.
And you remind us of this all the time, Senator Booker. You really do. You also remind us that we're not defined by what we're against. We're defined by what we're for. And I'm fully on the same page with you that we haven't lived up to our responsibility as a party and what we're for. I think our democracy is in trouble because our economy has been in trouble. And I think our economy has been in trouble because it's not like after the Depression or during the Depression or the Great Recession when people are out of work. The problem today is not that people are out of work. The problem today is that people are working. They are working. And they still can't get by. And you have too many millions of Americans who see their quality of life and they look at what their parents had and see it as better, and they look at the future for their kids and see it as worse. And amidst that economic difficulty, they're ready to embrace anyone who offers something different. Any demagogue who comes along and promises they alone can fix it. And while this demagogue is not going to fix it, and indeed he's made their lot much worse, it is not going to fix itself. It falls on us to come up with those big ideas. Now, some of those big ideas are not new. Medicare for all, which I support, is a big idea that would expand healthcare access for millions of people and make sure parents can go to work and understand that if they get sick or their kid gets sick, that they will have access to health care. We haven't kept pace with changes in the nature of work, changes that are going to accelerate with artificial intelligence, changes which have meant that over the last several decades, as the country's become more productive, that productivity and prosperity has simply not been shared with the people who made it possible. And I think this economic anxiety, which is felt all over the world with these global changes in the marketplace, have put great stress on the whole democratic experiment. If democracy is not working for people, they will flirt with other models like authoritarianism, but we are here to tell folks that is not the direction we want to go in. But it's still incumbent on us to offer bold ideas for how we can make the economy work for people again. But I do think that what has led people into such bitter antagonisms with each other has been a lot of this uncertainty, the feeling that they're only a car payment or a health problem away from failure. And it's up to us to address that. And so I join you, Senator Booker, in your optimism about the American people. I join you in the call on all of us, really in both parties, but if they're not going to do it, it falls on us to put forward the big, bold economic plans that will ensure that we can answer the central question of our time, which is if you're working hard in America, can you still earn a good living?
Yes.
We need to be able to answer that question. Yes, you can. And right now, what we are seeing with this tax cut for billionaires and large corporations is just going to make the problem so much worse. But I want to thank you, Senator Booker, for your irrepressible optimism about the country which I share. I want to thank you for seizing the helm today and every day to put forward that positive vision for our country. And my question is, where do you find the energy, my friend?
I don't know. I'm finding it from my colleagues right now. I'm finding it from my friends. I'm finding it from their heart and their commitment. And I'm finding it from the people whose names and stories we're reading. And I more than you know, I appreciate your friendship. I'm so happy you're my colleague now. And I believe that our future, our tomorrows, as bad as things seem, I still believe that our tomorrows are better than our yesterdays. Thank you. And I know you share that.
Amen.
Will the senator yield for a question?
Before I yield to you, I just want you to know I love you, my friend, and thanks. We're doing some good things recently, you and I, trying to solve some big problems, and I appreciate that. So I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Thank you, Senator. Unlike Senator Schiff, who said that he didn't know of your stamina before now, I knew well the stamina of Cory Booker. And I've always admired it, not just physical stamina, but moral stamina, the courage of conviction, the stamina to stand up and speak truth to power, which has become now one of the most common phrases that is used in public life. But Cory Booker has epitomized it throughout his career, not only in this body, but as mayor of Newark and as a leader in sports when he was an all-American athlete at Stanford. That physical stamina was matched by a moral stamina that is invaluable in life today because Americans have come to prize, above all, integrity, authenticity, genuineness, which Cory Booker epitomizes. And so it's not just his eloquence today on the floor and the soaring rhetoric that we have heard from him. It's his understanding and his sense of real life impacts of what we do here on everyday Americans and what everyday Americans are doing right now as we speak here on the floor. Everyday Americans are in the grocery stores where they're seeing higher and higher prices. Everyday Americans are at the VA hospital where their doctors and nurses and clinicians and schedulers and counselors may be out of a job because they may be among the tens of thousands targeted for dismissal. Everyday Americans are in schools, K through 12 and higher education, where the resources available for their teachers in the classrooms right now, in real time, are going to be cut. In fact, the workforce at the Department of Education will be cut by 1/2 as we speak, and funds will be no longer available to teach everyday Americans. And of course, everyday Americans right now are in hospitals and clinics. They are undergoing treatment for life-threatening diseases. Right now, they are lying on a hospital bed with needles in their arms or receiving other kinds of treatment that have been made available, life-saving treatments, by the research at NIH that will be crippled because of the cuts that we're seeing. And of course, everyday Americans are receiving Social Security checks. And Social Security will be cut by this administration. Medicaid, that provides for those everyday Americans who are in doctor's offices right now in America, even as we engage in this kind of soaring rhetoric, everyday Americans are contending with the real life problems of living in America. We live in a country that has never been so unequal in terms of wealth and pay. And if we look back to our own history, we see that that inequality is a danger to all of us. The stock market crash and depression occurred after the Gilded Age, when inequality became so drastic that the middle class was in danger. And of course, everyday Americans who are right now in the military are experiencing anger, disgust, fear, because the secrets about what they are doing, even as they engage in operations around the world, like those pilots who were going to bomb the Houthis, engaged in that top secret mission, have learned that the details of that mission, the time of their launch, the targets, the timing of their strikes, the weather, the identity of their targets, all were being discussed over a non-secure channel by a careless, reckless Secretary of Defense. And I don't need to go into the details of what was discussed, except to say our allies are reacting with that same disgust, anger, and fear. And they are having doubts about sharing intelligence with us. The Israelis are outraged by what they've seen. The intel communities of other countries are aghast and appalled. And we have yet to explore fully all of the potential ramifications, like what other conversations may have been on that unsecure kind of platform, who else knew about them, what the motives were. There needs to be a criminal investigation. I've called for it. And everyday Americans have a right to be fearful and angry, just as those pilots should be, and our allies, and intelligence communities all around the world. So we need not only an investigation, we need action to hold accountable the individuals, beginning with the Secretary of Defense, who should resign, the National Security Advisor, who should resign, but a criminal investigation launched by the FBI National Security Division to hold accountable anyone responsible for this breakdown of security, to meet the standard of public service that Senator Booker has outlined as what we should demand of ourselves and the responsibility that the American people have a right to deserve. So my question really is about the standard of public service that we should expect of our leaders, and whether there is something we can do. I'm asked so often, Senator Booker, as I go back to Connecticut, and I'm sure you are in New Jersey, what can we do? What can we do? You are leading us on the floor of the Senate by showing what we should be doing, fighting back, sounding the alarm for everyday Americans who are in the grocery store, in their schools, at the VA clinics, Social Security offices. What can we do?
I'm going to answer your question. I just first want to say thank you. There's been so many Congress people coming onto the floor from the House of Representatives. It reminds me of some other times where big things were happening and people would come to the floor, but this is a lot more, and I just want to express thank you for their kindness. I called the chairwoman of the CBC last night and then texted her, and the force of the CBC, which has been giving me spirit and strength for a long time, is really one of the best parts of my time here as a United States Senator, and the fact that they have come through constantly means a lot to me. I'm grateful that my cousin Pam has been here the entire time, just like Chris Murphy, the entire time in the gallery, and I'm so grateful for her. I love her, and she's sitting now next to my brother, and I'm just thankful for that. I want to answer your question because I get it all the time, and I'm not sure how to answer it all the time. I read letters, and it actually got me emotional in the middle of the night, where somebody would detail all their challenges. They would render personal information to me in letters about their struggles with health care, about their conditions, about their pain, about their hurt, just sending it out to their government official that they've never probably met, hoping that they might just listen to you and be activated by your voice. But then many of them ended the letter with that question: I am here to help you in any way. It really moves me because I believe in the deep decency of our country. And so I just want to try to answer that question more with me trying to think creatively about more that I can do as a leader. Because as I've said before, I think we as Democratic leaders have to start thinking more creatively, because obviously we don't control the Senate, we don't control the House, but we have positions that were given to us in trust by the people we represent. And moments like this require us to be more creative or more imaginative or just more persistent and dogged and determined. And I say that in front of some of my colleagues on this floor who I know personally, like you, but also some of my CBC colleagues who are sitting over here to my right who have been my rock for almost 13 years. And I just know, before I turn to my left, to the woman who represents the most important person in my 55 years, my mom, I just want to say that the answer to that question has to be something, that I will do something more than I'm doing now. Because the cause is so great, the challenges are so real, that I will do something that I have not done before to try to help my neighbor in a time of moral crisis in our country. And that I may be afraid, my voice may shake, but I'm going to speak up more. I may be demoralized by what's happening, but I'm going to find a way to get out of bed and breathe and know that I can make myself feel a little bit better by helping another person. I don't know what it is, but we got to help each other now through this and know, I'm a person of faith, and it was said to me by a colleague, that know that weeping will endure through the night, but joy will come. I'm going to turn to my left because I always say that she's a senator, but she's had one of the hardest jobs in all of America, which is to be the president of a shul. I met her and I realized she could probably do anything.
I know about that.
You know, yeah, yes. I am not Jewish, but my name is Booker, so I always say I'm Mish Booker. So there's a formal way I have to do this. So I see you, I love you, and I'm wondering if you have something to ask me.
Yeah, will the senator yield for a question?
I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Well, Booker, we're a people of the book.
Ah.
People of the book.
That
And
is
so
powerful, yes.
There you go. It's very powerful. The book you believe in, the books you believe in, what you read. We've heard everyone quote the Bible, philosophers, great thinkers and leaders, and you are one of them. And it has been my privilege to sit here next to you on this desk for the last 6 years I've been here, the best seat in the Senate.
You and I.
And
I'm gonna
take care of your mother, who is my constituent.
Yes.
My constituent.
Yes.
So I have your precious mother in our hands.
who I suspect, like my cousin and my brother in the gallery, that my mom is watching
Yes, well.
from Las Vegas.
Yes, and we appreciate what a good mother she was and how she raised you to be strong and to be smart and to be kind. And boy, oh boy, did she give you some damn stamina. I'll just tell you that, sir. We are in awe. But my question is, thank you, Mr. Booker. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for using your voice to stand up against Trump's administration reckless and extreme policies. And we've got a lot to talk about here. So I'm going to bring it back to Nevada.
Yes.
Because we got a lot of families in my state, and just like you, those letters, they're overwhelming, and they bring me to tears. The stops in the grocery store, and the airport, and the shopping mall, and the gas station, over and over again. People are worried. People are worried, and they want us to help, and they're wondering about this. People have talked to me about...
Senator,
Oops, thank you. Talk to me about how high costs at the grocery store are squeezing their budgets. They're concerned that the Trump tariffs, well, what are they going to do? Prices ain't going down. They are going to make prices go up instead of going down. President Trump declared tomorrow is Liberation Day. Liberation Day. This is what he plans to impose the latest round of across-the-board tariffs for goods on several nations. Tariffs that amount to a national sales tax on every single person that goes to a grocery store. In Nevada, in New Jersey, I see my esteemed colleague, Senator Duckworth, in Illinois, and every state in this nation. Tariffs that amount to a national sales tax. Now, Nevada's economy relies heavily on tourism. I don't have to tell anyone that. And these tariffs don't target tourism specifically, but make no mistake, they will have a profound impact on a city like Las Vegas, the entertainment capital of the world. Because when prices go up across the board, what happens? Families' budgets at the kitchen table, those kitchen table budgets, they are squeezed. It means the number of visitors coming to Las Vegas, the visitors that fuel our economy, go down. It means the price that every single person, every single hotel, every single service we have goes up because of those tariffs. And so it's going to have a devastating impact on Nevada, on our local economy, on our small businesses. 99% of businesses in Nevada are small businesses. Small businesses. It's going to have a devastating impact on them and the good paying jobs it supports. So we see the impact. International travel down in the United States. Down. Well, that's a whole nother discussion. Someone will be asking that question too. It's driving down our visitor numbers. It hurts our economy in Nevada, hurts our economy all across this great nation. In fact, booking for flights in Canada, they're already down by 70% compared to last year. Canada, our great neighbor, partner, and ally to the north, down 70%. And the most troubling part is a recent report estimates that up to 14,000 jobs, hospitality jobs, could be at risk due to decreased international travel as a result of these horrible, misguided tariffs. And I just want to tell you that I'm looking at all of my colleagues and I'm looking at you, and you have given us the inspiration to stand here, to use our voice, to use our power, to show that we are not without a say in this country. We are not without a say, and we cannot go quietly, ever, without that fight. So, Senator Booker, I want to ask you what you think these tariffs are going to do. Well, not to just the place where your mom lives in Las Vegas, but where families live all across this country. And every price at the market, every price at the gas station, the mall, wherever you go, and where people depend, like my Nevadans, on their livelihood for tourism. And so I will repeat what Senator Blumenthal said. Senator Booker, what can we do? That's the question we're asked. What can we do?
I want to answer your question, but first I want to just say what you already know. You represent my mom. You represent one of her best friends, Lou. You represent my Aunt Shirley. You represent my Uncle Butch. You represent my Aunt Marilyn. You represent so much of my family. This is the place where my father died. When Harry Reid came to his bedside when he was sick and I was still running for this office and showed me the extraordinary kindness of senators from Nevada. That tradition has continued. I'm so grateful for you. My family's grateful for you. I'm grateful that we were founders of the Black Jewish Caucus. And in fact, I keep this
Juneteenth Seder coming up.
Juneteenth Seder coming up, and I'm gonna put this on as you have it on. As I think about Edon Alexander and all those who are suffering, I'm just so grateful for our friendship and what we've done against anti-Semitism, what we've done for the Abraham Accords. You are somebody that you and I find a lot of ways to work with. And one of the best things I saw in you was on January 6th, sitting in this row, me, you, Mark Kelly. And I always say that the best, often in the most difficult of circumstances, you see the best of people. And I don't know if you remember this, but staffers started rushed in, and usually you have to have special identification. And then some of them stood behind us, and they were crying, and they were upset, and they were frightened. And I just watched you go from senator to mother, And I watched you comforting people in their times of fear when they thought they were going to be killed, literally. And you were this voice of comfort, voice of calm. I saw you in one of our worst countries, worst crisis. I saw your light. I saw your love. I saw the Jewish mom, and I benefited from that. I just feel that Trump mocks us. What does his Liberation Day mean to the people that are shackled to debt? From medical debt, that are shackled with student debt, that can't afford the rising costs of groceries. What's his liberation mean? To people who are chained by fear right now, waiting with bated breath to see if the Medicaid programs they rely on are going to be cut. What does his liberation mean? To people who are literally in jails right now because they were disappeared from our streets. What does his liberation mean to people who can't afford homes because of his tariffs, who dreamed of a new car, but that's going to go up as well? I don't know what he means by liberation. I honestly don't. I wish he'd explain it to the American people. Who's liberated in this financial times? Who's liberated? I don't think the law firms feel liberated, that we're so threatened by you that they felt the only way they could get from under the threat of you is to come to you and beg them and offer them and say we'll do this and say we'll give you millions of dollars of pro bono worth. I don't think they feel liberated. What about the people that are banned from the press corps because they won't call it the Gulf of America? The idea of the press, the freedom of the press, do they feel his liberty? What does his liberty mean? What does Donald Trump's Liberty Day tomorrow mean? In a nation where I read letter after letter of people that feel like their liberty is gone, that they're losing sleep at night worried about Social Security. What does liberty mean to the veteran that was laid off, that fought for my liberty? What does Donald Trump's liberty mean? What is he talking about? What does his liberty mean to Canada, who fought next to us, who died next to Americans fighting for our causes? What does his liberty mean to them? I don't understand Donald Trump. I really don't. There are going to be PhD students writing about him for generations. He'll love that in heaven. He'll look down and say, I'm so happy people are talking about me. But I will tell you this. I love great presidents. I love that Lincoln said, with malice towards none, with charity towards all. But I hear Donald Trump say, with malice towards everybody that does not tell me how great I am. And charity, I don't know if he understands that. What it means to show sympathy and compassion and empathy and to help people whether they like you or not. I love great presidents. I love FDR. You have nothing to fear but fear itself. But the letter after letter, the word fear, the word terror, I was reading from voices from my state and across the country. It's as if Donald Trump is saying, be afraid of me, the big man with the power. Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. There was another president that said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And yet Ukrainian Americans are watching their president go, not Mr. Gorbachev, tear down the wall. They're saying, hey, Mr. Putin, come in and take the Donbass. I'm going to start the negotiations, not with Zelensky at the table. I'm going to call him a dictator. I'm going to start the negotiations from a position to giving Putin what he wants, Ukrainian sovereign land, and that's where we'll start the negotiation. And I love John F. Kennedy quoting a poet saying, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. What is Donald Trump? Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what can you do for Donald Trump? Because I will threaten you until you kowtow. I will threaten to run primaries against you if you don't fall in line and vote for things you know are wrong. I will terrorize your law firm unless you come to me and kiss my ring. I will make political your applications for your merger. I will drop cases against you. I will pardon you if, as he said in a recent pardon, he was a pro-Trump guy. I don't understand this. I really don't. And I don't understand how he tries to divide Americans. I got on a plane once. I'm on a plane, and I'm juggling to put my carry-on up, and I get lots of reactions in airports. I have to say, on the whole part, good, but occasionally I think my colleagues next month, should send me a Mother's Day card, because occasionally I get called, "You mother," with something following it. And so here I am putting up my overhead baggage, and I sit down next to two people, the presiding officer before this, my friend from Alabama, two Alabamans, one 80 years old, one 60 years old, mother and daughter. And they see people paying attention to me. They said, "Who are you? Are you a professional athlete?" And as a middle-aged, overweight black guy, my ego wasn't insulted. I wanted to say, well, I could be, but I chose to serve the people. But no, I go, "No, ma'am, I'm not." "Well, who are you then?" I go, "Well, I'm a senator." And we're so conditioned in America, if we meet a congressperson out and about, the first thing we want to know is, whose team are you on? My team or their team? Us versus them. Horrible dynamic of tribalism in our country.
Can't believe he's still ripping it up.
And I took a deep breath. I looked at these two great American women, and I said, "Ma'am, I'm a Democrat." And the woman next to me looks at me suddenly sour, and she said, "I should have brought my Trump hat," and she wheeled it away from me. And immediately I said, "You know what? I'm not going to dance to this tune. I'm going to scratch this record. And I looked at her and I go, "Oh my gosh, Donald Trump signed two of the biggest bills I wrote in Congress into law." I said the First Step Act, which we passed in this body, 87 votes. We would have got 88 if one of my dear friends and colleagues was not off trying to do whatever in the world and he wasn't here to vote on it. And I talked about opportunity zones, working with Tim Scott to get billions of dollars invested into some of our country's poorest rural and urban areas. Now, they were confused. But by the end of that flight, Donald Trump didn't divide us, though. By the end of that flight, I was talking to them like fellow Americans, and we found so many points of connection, so much common humanity, and so much common cause. These outrage machines, TV, and these devices, I want to say to America, their financial interest is to keep your eyes on the screen as much as possibly can. And you know what? Sells division, divide, moral indignation. I will tell you this. I have this great friend, part of the Bold Club, named Van Jones. He told me this story that he was on Crossfire on CNN. And Van Jones got on with Newt Gingrich. Van Jones, a green activist, a guy I met in law school, extraordinary man, speaks like a poet to me, and he worked in the Obama White House. And then Newt Gingrich, very known Republican, the two of them sit down, but Brene Brown writes something extraordinary. She writes, "It's hard to hate up close, so pull people in." And so they get on this show called Crossfire, and they find out, with all the differences they have, they also have commonalities, things they agree on, and they actually kind of like each other. So they go to the producers and they say, "Hey, could you let us do the final segment called Ceasefire? Can you let us do the final segment called Ceasefire?" And the producers say, "Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead." And so they do this last segment talking about the areas they agree, but the producers run in after a few shows and stop them. Can't do it. Why? Ratings are going down. There are a lot of legitimate differences in places I'm going to stand my ground and fight for people's health care, for people's Social Security. I'm going to fight. But I'm never going to get into a position where anybody in this country can make me hate another American. Because this is the age where we have to figure out how to live up to those words of their e pluribus unum. That's the call of our ancestors. To put more indivisible into this one nation under God. That's the challenge. And there's enough things that we agree on in America, and especially when we stop and talk about things like the child tax credit, most Americans are for that. Oh, gosh, I've been waiting for you, for crying out loud. Why didn't you
You were on a roll.
Oh,
You
come
were on a
on.
roll. And
Come on, Senator.
Will you yield for a
I
question?
yield for a question while retaining the floor.
I don't know what kind of food you eat on that vegan diet of yours, but I need to figure out more of that vegan diet. One place where we can and do care that unites us as a nation is the role of our nation's veterans, the heroes who have sacrificed for us. Although with this president, I guess he doesn't hold veterans in the same esteem. As someone who has bled for this nation, I guess I joined the ranks of the suckers and losers who have bled and died for this nation in the president's estimation. But I just wanted to start off by saying thank you again, Senator Booker, for all that you're doing as you hold the floor today, but also every other day, to underline the pain and damage Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing, not just to our country, but to middle-class Americans throughout our country. And tragically, that harm even extends to our nation's veterans, who have sacrificed so much to protect this country and keep Americans safe, who should be shielded from this needless chaos and uncertainty. Senator Booker, I know you are well aware that this administration is firing more veterans than any other administration in modern history. It's been reported that this administration, in these first few months in office, has fired approximately 6,000 veterans from federal service across this country. This list of firing, especially at the VA, has resulted in operations for our veterans being canceled. We've seen reports of the Caregivers Hotline, a hotline that was set up to support the caregivers who provide medical caregiving to their loved ones who served and sacrificed and are now disabled. There are delays in that hotline being answered because Donald Trump fired all of these veterans. There are people that support the crisis hotline were also fired. I know this because some of them are my constituents and asked for help. I had one individual who served in the military for over 2 decades. Did such a good job on the crisis hotline as a frontline person answering the phone, trying to prevent their brothers and sisters from the idea of suicide. They did such a good job that they were promoted to be a trainer. They were promoted to be a supervisor, which then made them probationary, and they were fired. We were able to get some of these people their jobs back. Some of them are still out there without their jobs. This is what Donald Trump and Elon Musk has already done. This does not help our nation's veterans. This does not help our nation's heroes. If anything, it is a betrayal to them. It is a betrayal, a cruel betrayal to the men and women who bravely answered the call to serve our country in uniform. A call that this president dodged 5 different times when he had the opportunity to serve. Now men and women in uniform came home from serving, and many of them chose to continue their service to our country as federal employees. How are Elon and Trump thanking these brave, selfless Americans? They're doing it by showing them the door and leaving them wondering how they'll be able to afford next week's groceries or next month's rent, forcing them to look for a new job. The senator from New Jersey and I are both working together to help our heroes get their jobs back, which is why I've introduced a Protect Veterans Jobs Act to reinstate all veterans who were wrongly fired from their federal jobs by Trump and Musk.
Yeah.
It is a critical bill to help those who have already been fired. But according to recent reports, Trump and Musk are just getting started. From everything that we've seen,
the output of the
they are
soundboard,
planning on firing
input
another
of the
80,000 VA employees,
to the output of the TikTok.
almost a third of whom
I think I
are
can get this
veterans
streamed live on
themselves.
TikTok too.
So that's going to be another 25 veterans on a chopping block on top of the 6,000 who've already been fired. It is a complete betrayal from Trump and from Musk. Firing these VA employees will even harm veterans that Trump is not firing, because it's going to force them to wait longer to see their health care providers. It's going to make them wait longer to have their disability claims adjudicated. It is going to make them wait longer to have someone pick up their calls at the Veterans Crisis Line. It is going to make them wait even longer, and their loved ones wait even longer to have their burial and funeral expense reimbursements request processed. and so much more, all while the VA's backlog of unprocessed claims continues growing. I have another question for you, but first, for the senator from New Jersey, I was wondering if you could tell us if you have heard from your veterans who have been fired, if you have heard from your veterans who've seen their services delayed in New Jersey and around the country.
Yes, 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 yes. This is my veterans book. This is what I was reading from earlier, and everything you're saying is right. And it is such an insult. I read stories from our veterans. It's such an insult to the highest calling of our country to stand and serve as you did. As you did. Injured veterans. Disabled veterans. I read an article about thousands of disabled veterans that want to serve their country, love this nation so much that they want to serve in humble jobs doing noble things. And how do we treat them? They say 83,000 people being laid off. Quarter of them are veterans from the VA itself, but this doesn't include veterans that do things for the Park Service and our national parks. Veterans that do things for us in the Defense Department, veterans that do things for us across this country. I found in my state some of the greatest leaders I have met in my state are veterans who are still serving veterans. And then veteran entrepreneurs, you know the data, they're incredibly successful. They create to our economy. The VA is cutting not just veteran jobs, they're cutting contracts with veteran-owned businesses. I don't understand how you can say out of one side of your mouth, you honor and respect our veterans, which is not what our president's always said. Dear God, what he said about John McCain. I still remember John McCain is in a town hall with Barack Obama fighting fiercely to be the president of the United States. And somebody gets up and says that Barack Obama, as if it's an insult, it's not, is a Muslim or something, and he grabs the mic back and corrects her. One of his voters, he corrects her on national TV. This is wrong. He's a guy who loves his wife, Christian, loves his family. I mean, that is character and honor. Can you ever see that from our president now? And this is how wrong I was. And I want to admit, I made mistakes, I've been wrong. I remember where I was when he said in his campaign that he's no hero, that people who are captured are not heroes. I said to the people that were with me, there goes his 15 minutes of fame. I thought that was the end of Trump. But somehow you can become president of the United States when you insult the veterans who serve. I want to read you, and I know you have another question, but can I read you? I don't know, John Lewis and John McCain, the two Johns are coming up a lot in so far my 20 hours. But I want to read you this. I want to read this when you were here, because I read this, and it's let me all tell you, this is John McCain writing. Let me all tell you what I think about the Pledge of Allegiance, our flag, and our country. I want to tell you a story about when I was a prisoner of war. I spent 5 years in the Hanoi Hilton. In the early years of our imprisonment, the North Vietnamese kept us in solitary confinement, or 2 or 3 to a cell. In 1971, the North Vietnamese moved us from these conditions of isolation into large rooms with as many as 30 to 40 men to a room. This was, as you can imagine, a wonderful change, and was a direct result of the efforts of millions of Americans, led by people like Nancy and Ronald Reagan on behalf of a few hundred POWs 10,000 miles from home. One of the men moved into my cell was Mike Christian. Mike came from a small town near Selma, Alabama. He didn't wear a pair of shoes until he was 13 years old. At 17, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. He later earned a commission. He became a naval flying officer and was shot down and captured in 1967. Mike had a keen and deep appreciation for the opportunities this country and our military provide for people who want to work and want to succeed. The uniforms we wore in prison consisted of a blue short-sleeved shirt, trousers that looked like pajama trousers, and rubber sandals that were made out of automobile tires. I recommend them highly. My pair lasted my entire stay. As a part of the change in treatment, the Vietnamese allowed some prisoners to receive packages from home. And some of these packages were handkerchiefs, scarves, and other items of clothing. Mike got himself a piece of white cloth and a piece of red cloth and fashioned himself a bamboo needle. Over a period of a couple months, he sewed the American flag on the inside of his shirt. Every afternoon before we had a bowl of soup, we would hang Mike's shirt on the wall of our cell and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I know that saying the Pledge of Allegiance may not seem the most important and meaningful part of our day now, our day in the Senate, but I can assure you that for those men in that stark prison cell, it was indeed the most important and meaningful event of our day. One day, the Vietnamese searched our cell and discovered Mike's shirt with the flag sewn inside and removed it. That evening, they returned, opened the door of the cell, called for Mike Christian to come out, closed the door of the cell, and for the benefit of us all, beat Mike Christian severely for the next couple of hours. Then they opened the door of the cell and threw him back inside. He was not in good shape. We tried to comfort and take care of him as well as we could. The cell in which we lived had a concrete slab in the middle of which we slept, 4 naked light bulbs in each corner of the room. After things quieted down, I went to lie down and go to sleep. As I did, I happened to look into the corner of the room. Sitting there beneath that dim light bulb with a piece of white cloth, a piece of red cloth, another shirt and his bamboo needle was my friend, Mike Christian, sitting there with his eyes almost shut from his beating, making another American flag. He was not making the flag because it made Mike Christian feel better. He was making that flag because he knew how important it was for us to be able to pledge our allegiance to our flag and our country. Duty, honor, country. We must never forget those thousands of Americans who with their courage, with their sacrifice, with their lives, made those words live for all of us. That is our veterans. That is you. That is you, my friend. And Trump is coming after them. Doge is coming after them. They're firing them right now. And are we silent, America? Are we silent when the bravest amongst us, the most honorable amongst us, the most noble amongst us are losing their jobs? Did you speak up when they came for American veterans? When they fired them for no good reason? What did you do? What did you say? I say no. I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Thank you for what you've said. John McCain was a true hero. He said the same thing to me when I first met him. I do have a question for you, which will come later, but I thought I would tell you the story of how I met John McCain. I was recently wounded within weeks of being able to finally sit up for the first time. I was in physical therapy, and Senator McCain came and visited us. And the nurses and occupational therapists and physical therapists came running in and said, Senator McCain, this is Captain Duckworth. She's a hero just like you, and said to me, you're a hero like Senator McCain. You were both shot down. And Senator McCain looked at me and said, in that voice of his, didn't take no hero to fly into a missile. The good pilots don't get shot down. And I knew then and there that I really liked him, because he was right. The real heroes were the buddies who carried me out of that field in Iraq. The real heroes are the sergeant and the rescue bird that carried me out and has to live with the post-traumatic stress. The real heroes are all the men and women who survived and came home and need the care that they have rightfully earned. The care that we're providing with them with the PACT Act, a bill that you supported, a bill that you spoke up for. Even, wow, members our colleagues across the aisle, many of them said it was too expensive. And at a time when we should be expanding the PACT Act, when we should be recognizing more of the illnesses and injuries that came out of service around burn pits and toxic substances.
There it is.
You have a president who is cutting the VA, who wants to cut those jobs, who want to go after our veterans' benefits, whom, just like Elon Musk has said, sees veterans as the people with their hands out. We don't have our hands out. We're simply asking for what this country promised us. Where were you, Mr. President? Where were you, Elon, when this country asked for someone to serve? When this country asked, who among you will leave your family, leave your friends, leave your neighbors, and put on her colors and defend her? Not for your mom, not for your dad, not for your family members, but for strangers who will never know your name, who will never know your sacrifice. Who among you will do that?
Progress. The views keep going up.
Thank
then
God.
we'll watch it.
From Lexington and Concord, from Iwo Jima, from Yadrang Valley, from Kandahar, from Fallujah, there were Americans who stood up and said, I will. I will defend this great nation. I will wear her colors with pride.
You know,
And all we have to do as a nation is live up to one tiny little percentage of that sacrifice that they made. Let them have the benefits that they've earned. And yet Donald Trump and Elon Musk are cutting those benefits. The biggest predictor of veterans' homelessness is not post-traumatic stress disorder. It is not a health condition. The biggest predictor of veterans' homelessness is lack of employment, not having a job. That begins the spiral downwards for veterans that ends up with them becoming homeless. And I will tell everyone in these chambers and in this nation, we are all dishonored when a veteran must lay their head down on the very same streets that he or she defended to sleep that night. We are all dishonored. The VA has done tremendous work to fight veterans' homelessness, and that has been a bipartisan effort. And these cuts that are costing veterans their jobs are going to start some of those veterans, unfortunately, on that path to homelessness. These cuts are going to mean those veterans' homelessness programs that will prevent our veterans from becoming unhoused, those programs will not be able to take care of all the veterans of the demand. I'm already seeing it. I spent this past weekend in Missouri at the Cochran VA Medical Center, hearing about the challenges that they're facing. They need to expand. They don't need to shrink. They said there's going to be another 25,000 veterans moving into the area. They actually have to expand their services. And yet Elon Musk, enabled by Donald Trump, is cutting veterans' jobs, veterans' benefits, because according to them, veterans aren't heroes. We are suckers and losers. Well, I beg to differ. I beg to differ. I am sure that my colleague from New Jersey knows that firing 80,000 employees from the Department of Veterans Affairs wouldn't just cause longer delays for veterans. It will doom our VA's ability to process claims that the influx of claims under the PACT Act. A law that is helping ensure veterans who were exposed to toxins while serving can get the care that they have earned, with more than 1 million claims already approved in the short time since it's become law. I can't think of a single good reason to hurt so many veterans. And I'll just ask the senator from New Jersey, can you think of any reasons?
I'm very moved by your comments. I want to say that from John McCormick to Jack Reed, the Senate has a good number of people who serve this nation who answered the call. They should all get our honor and respect. Senator Blumenthal served, and he has a son, Navy SEAL. We should have a reverence for those people, because a lot of them didn't make it back. A lot of people didn't make it back, and a lot of people who came home with horrible wounds, visible and invisible. We should all be ashamed of the veterans that are committing suicide. We should all be ashamed of veteran homelessness. We have the capacity. We are a great enough nation to help them. But the ones that didn't come back, they watch over us. They look down upon this nation. I want to read you one more thing, because was raised by parents who could not think they could, they really worried, raising me in an affluent town in a beautiful home, that I would not recognize how extraordinarily privileged I was. My dad used to say to me, boy, don't walk around this house like you hit a triple. You were born on third base. My dad would say things to me like, boy, don't sit at this table and not realize that you drink deeply from wells of freedom and liberty that you did not dig. You eat from banquet tables of blessings prepared for you by your ancestors. You must metabolize those blessings, not so that you could pay your ancestors back, but that you could pay it forward. My dad, when I got degrees from Stanford, Oxford, and Yale, said, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life ain't about the degrees you get, it's about the service you give. And so McCormick and Reed and Tammy, I'm here because of people that died for this country, that stormed beaches in Normandy in this country. They were at Iwo Jima for this country. They liberated Nazi concentration camps for this country. They are buried. I've seen their burials. In Thailand, fields full of American soldiers who never made it home. Every time I see one of those, I get overcome with emotion. I can't think about, when I look at their ages, 18, 19, 20, 21. And so let me read this, and I'm going to compose myself, because you got me all emotional, Tammy. Thought you were my friend. This is a poem written by Billy Rose. You know it probably. It's called The Unknown Soldier. And just listen to the words and let them echo and see if we are living up to them, if our president lives up to them, the most powerful person in the world or the richest man in the world. Are they respecting? There's a graveyard near the White House where the unknown soldier lies, and the flowers there are splendid with the tears from a mother's eyes. I stood there not long ago with roses for the brave, and I suddenly heard the voice speak out of the grave. I am the unknown soldier, the spirit voice began, and I think I have the right to ask some questions man to man. Are my buddies taken care of? Was their victory so sweet? Is that big reward you offered selling pencils on the street? Did they really win the freedom they battled to achieve? Do you still respect that croix de guerre above that empty sleeve? Does a gold star in the window now mean anything at all? I wonder how my old girl feels when she hears the bugle call. And that baby who sang, hello, Central, give me no man's land. Can they replace her daddy with a military band? I wonder if the profiteers have satisfied their greed. I wonder if a soldier's mother ever is in need. I wonder if the kings who planned it all are really satisfied. They played their game of checkers, and 11 million died. I am the unknown soldier, and maybe I died in vain. But if I were alive and my country called, I'd do it all over again. Thank you, Senator. Every time I see you, I have such a reverence and gratitude that I get to serve alongside of you. I didn't serve in the military alongside of you like those courageous soldiers, like those people who carried you at risk to themselves, people who saved your life, the people that helped you in rehab, the people that empowered you to get back on your feet and run for one of the highest offices in the land, and then you serve here with distinction because you don't forget who helped you get here. Exactly. And my dad, who's in heaven, with a lot of the other good folks from American history. I don't know what he'd think of his son, but I know he'd be proud of you.
I'm just looking there.
All right. Let's talk about the economy.
No chance.
Christopher Coons.
7 o'clock. So at 4 o'clock, he's got.
Senator yield for a question.
I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
He's in the 20th hour, right?
Familiar with Rory Badger of Delaware? Is the senator familiar with my guest to the speech to a joint session of Congress delivered by President Trump just a few weeks ago?
So every time I answer the question, we have to go through the same thing.
There we go. Restricted again.
Slightly familiar, yes, because we talked about it. But I would be really happy if you asked me another question and filled in some gaps.
If I might, I simply want to ask my colleague.
Then I yield for a question.
Just
If you
as
want
soon
to
as you
ask me a
start
question, I
joining.
yield for a question while
On
retaining
TikTok here.
the floor with the recognition that I have to do it because I'm standing
People
between two
started joining
Delawareans
in,
and
it
I'm a
got
little
to like
nervous.
5, and then it made
Jersey never wants to be between two Delawareans.
To my colleague and friend from the great state of New Jersey, I simply am asking the question. Are you familiar with a Marine from Seaford, Delaware? His name is Rory Badger. He is not a man of politics. He is not a partisan. And he only came to my attention when he called my office for assistance. Rory Badger volunteered to serve our nation, was deployed to Afghanistan, and is a decorated combat veteran of the United States Marine Corps. Working through the impact of his service, he's returned to the United States and was engaged by Fish and Wildlife in Delaware and doing great work to promote conservation. With a young wife and young son, Marine Badger reached for what was his dream job, to work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Conservation Service. All Rory wanted to do, he conveyed to me in a letter and then in person when he came to visit here. All he wanted to do was to help farmers on the Delmarva Peninsula conserve their land, create wildlife habitat, protect the environment, and be in places both beautiful and still. As you, my friend and colleague, have documented in long discussion and debate in the last hour, he is one of thousands of veterans who woke to receive an unjust and unwarranted termination email that said it was for cause without citing any cause, and that threw him into the chaos and hurt of having been summarily fired by the American government. He's ultimately been rehired, thankfully, but that period of chaos and of loss made him question our nation and its commitment to our veterans. I will share with my colleague, had the opportunity to visit with our friend Senator McCain to the prison where he was imprisoned for 5.5 years, tortured repeatedly, and lived through the experiences you've just shared of fellow veterans risking their lives to do the most simple thing that we take for granted at the beginning of every day here, to pledge allegiance to our flag. I had a chance on visiting the Hanoi Hilton with our friend and former colleague, Senator McCain, to ask him a simple question, which was at the end of his describing the period when friends were beaten horribly, when some were killed, and when his Vietnamese captors told him, "We found out who your father is, a 4-star admiral, and so we will release you any day." I simply asked him, knowing that you could at any moment on any day raise your hand and say, "I will accept your offer and go home." How did you endure another 5 years of torture and imprisonment? His answer simply, to do so would not have been honorable. My question to you, my friend and colleague, was the firing of Rory Badger honorable? Is the leadership of our current administration in its treatment of our veterans honorable? Is the value shown by the decisions being made by Elon Musk and his team at Doge honorable? Are we putting at risk the very honor of our nation in the mistreatment of the veterans of this country? This question I put to my friend and colleague.
I thank you, Senator Kuhn, by your strength of voice, by your tone, by the colleague and citizen that you invoke. You are saying the answer with strength, my friend. How do we judge our nation? What measure do we judge America? Is it by how tall our buildings are? Well, those are great marvels. But other countries have taller buildings. God, maybe Ezra Klein has got me so focused now on making our nation do bold and build great things, but does the speed of our rail, as an Amtrak guy, speak to the greatness of our nation? No other nations have faster rail. Does the wealth of our people, we have more billionaires than any other country, does that speak to the greatness of our nation? No. I think the things that speak to the greatness of a nation is how do we take care of each other? How do we take care of our elders who deserve our respect and our reverence and gratitude for building America, for sustaining America, for doing the hard jobs to raise families, to set the next generation on their way? I think we should be judged by how we treat our children. They are the only true hope we have of seeing tomorrows that we will never live through. I think we should be judged by how we treat the sick. Whether it's people with the disease of alcoholism or mental health or crippling cancers or chronic diseases, what do we do? I think we should be judged by how we nurture our families. God, we put American families under crazy stress. Affordable child care, paid family leave. Other nations, our competitors, have these things. I think we should judge the greatness
That's only 5 hours
of our
I've been
nation
on the air.
by how we treat our veterans. These honorable men and women. Some of them who gave their last measure.
So that's 20 hours.
Last
right?
measure of their devotion. On fields across the world, from Thailand to Gettysburg. They gave their lives. And those who came home, the America they experienced will speak to the truth of who we are. And so I'm in this place like you're in this place. We've been friends for a long time. I'm blaming you a little bit because you're one of those people I called and said, hey, I'm thinking about running for governor, I'm thinking about running for senator. You told me to come here, man. I'm joking. I love you for it. I'm honored and blessed that New Jersey sent me here. I know that you and I are working to, and let's talk like we talk when we're not on the floor of the Senate. We both are deeply devoted Christians. You told me one of my favorite stories in the Senate, which I won't tell right now. I've been asking you to tell that story. I hope you'll tell it, but it's just about how your parents, James Baldwin said, children are never good at listening to their elders, but they never fail to imitate them. You are a great reflection of the stories of your parents who told me. And you and I grapple with this faith of ours, which demands the most radical love. Radical love. What does the Bible say about immigrants? I mean, come on. What does the Bible say about the poor? What does the Bible say about the hated, the prostitute, the leper, the people who are looked down upon? What's the story of the prodigal son? What's Matthew 25 say about how we should live? Even as to the least of these, you did unto me. How many times does the Bible mention poverty? How many? I'm abiding by it. I will not yield to you. But I knew you would do it, and I don't. 2,000 times it mentions poverty. And does it say we should scorn the poor? Does it say we should ignore the poor? No, it calls us to love our neighbor. No exceptions to that.
Will the senator yield for a question?
Thank you, man. I've been waiting for that question. The prayers of the righteous availeth much. You are a righteous man. I have a lot of work to do. So I yield for a question while retaining the floor. I tried to instigate you, Chris. I tried to throw out Jesus bait.
You have, sir.
Good, thank God. I yield for a question about whatever you want to ask me for, but I'm retaining the floor.
To my good friend and colleague, as we transition to comments about the economy, are you familiar with the very first time that Jesus stood in his home synagogue in Nazareth to preach? He read from the scroll a passage from, I believe, Isaiah 61, verse 1 to 2. This is recorded in Luke chapter 4. And it is a well-known passage. And I rely upon it to understand what was the ministry of Jesus centrally about. He says, this is fulfilled in your hearing today. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. I don't think it is possible to read the Gospels and to read the Torah and to understand righteousness without hearing over and over and over in the